Okay, this is a video on information I would like to share with y'all. Unique insights. Now, last night I literally got this from God, from praying to God and just listening to Him tell me that He narrated this in my head. So I'm excited to share this information as it's to me it's proof. So what I'm about to share with you is proof to me, and I'm pretty sure in my feelings and my knowledge of what I'm about to share with you that not only will it prove whatever I'm trying to prove, but I don't think it could be denied or even questioned to any degree, especially coming straight from God. Meaning, the fact that I got this information from God Himself is ultimately hard to believe, and so it's shocking and profound. And it's just, if I could tell you a story that is literally something special, something utterly shocking, revealing, and amazing, well, then here it is. I don't foresee anyone disagreeing with it or finding any fault in it because I think they'll know this is true enough. They'll be fully aware of the fact that it has to be real. So I take it all as facts. Everything I'm sharing with you as absolute facts, even though it's just a story that was narrated in my head. So Apollo had a favorite high priest, and his name was Helenus. Apollo was the god of the sun, who was also a excuse me. Apollo was the sun god. Apollo was a sun god who was also a god of the sun, like his father. So the title, the sun god, would be the son of what the other title is the god of the sun, which is the father of that sun god, which is actually a god of the sun, not a sun god. It's just the official title that I was given and how to understand it. The gift of prophecy was given to Helenus by the god Apollo. And since it was meant to be a gift to his soul, not to just his body in that one lifetime, Apollo, for some reason at the time, and this was during the Trojan conflict, it would have been during the beginning of the War of Troy, Apollo wanted to ensure, or he had some kind of an idea as a god, that he wanted to ensure that no matter what happened to him during the Trojan conflict, all the gods and goddesses would go to war. Some of the goddesses and gods would be dead, or more than some. By the end of the conflict, maybe most of the gods and goddesses were actually dead. They killed each other off. So basically, Apollo must have foreseen this somewhat and thought, maybe if I don't survive this war, I would like to give my high priest, who will survive this war, because even if he dies, he'll be on a karmic wheel of reincarnation. So Apollo was aware his high priest, Helenus, was going to be born over and over again. He certainly was just a man. He wasn't immortal or anything, so he wasn't a god. He was just a high priest that was really loyal to him. In fact, he was so loyal that he was loyal to the death and utterly dedicated to him in the most extreme ways. So Apollo saw in his high priest Apollo something spectacular. He thought, this high priest of mine is unsurpassed. I've never seen anybody so loyal and so dedicated as he makes an example of what a high priest should be. And Apollo was extremely impressed with him. In fact, he loved him so much, people thought they were actually lovers when they were not lovers, actually. It's true that they were that close emotionally. So this was a man who was literally as close to God as you could imagine. God loved him and wanted him to be rewarded, and not just the lifetime that he was going to give him this gift of prophecy, but he wanted him to be rewarded and guaranteed that he would get it in every lifetime to come, so that if Apollo didn't survive the war of the gods, and he expected it possibly might not, he figured, my high priest will live on, even though he'll forget. He won't remember who he is next lifetime. He'll forget who he ever was this lifetime, but I want him to get the gift still. Even if he doesn't know who he is, I want him still to have it and receive it. So ultimately, how could Apollo guarantee that he could really protect his priest and his right to receive his gift? Well, he had to get the goddesses and the gods, the father of gods, Zeus, to agree to it. First, he wanted to bestow immortality on Helenus, because he actually wanted to make Helenus immortal because he liked him that much. The goddesses forbid it, said, absolutely not. You're not making your high priest immortal. He's not going to become a god. There's no way we're going to have anything to do with it. And then Zeus ultimately had to agree with the goddesses. He said, your priest is loyal and maybe the most loyal of all, son. So it was Zeus telling his son Apollo, your priest may be loyal, but he's just a priest and he's just a dedicated loyalty servant to you. He can't be given a gift of immortality, because immortality is given to the heroes of the times, the demigods, the demigoddesses, the men of renown, the warriors of the time, the leaders of men were ones who got to be immortal and given that gift from God. So Zeus said, no. So unfortunately, your high priest's dedication to you, no matter how great it is and how loyal he is, we're not giving him immortality. So Apollo was upset. He basically couldn't talk anybody into agreeing with it. So he had to deny Helenus. Basically, he couldn't make him immortal. So as a result, he wanted to give him a gift. So he gave him the gift of prophecy so he could foretell the future and ultimately see into the future, kind of like a psychic medium. And he also wanted to guarantee that it would be an eternal gift so that he'd receive it every lifetime for the rest of his lifetimes, which might be hundreds or thousands of lifetimes to come. And of course, if he had survived the war, then he would be there to do it himself. But ultimately, Apollo foresaw his own death possibility, and that he thought if he didn't survive, he wanted to still make sure. So he talked to the goddesses and said, if you won't let me make him immortal, and I think he deserves immortality, well then, will you guarantee that if I don't survive this war? So this was Apollo talking to the goddesses and his father Zeus. He said, will you guarantee that if I die for some reason in this war, from whatever reason, that you'll give him the gift next lifetime if I'm not here to do it myself? The goddesses agreed if they could hold on to the gift until he was of age. So the goddesses agreed that, yes, we would promise him to give him, you're not going to make him immortal, but if you want to give him a gift of prophecy and guarantee every lifetime he'll get it, we'll agree to that. If he has to give that gift to us until he's 18 years old, and when he comes of age, we'll give him his intellectual property and his gift, but not before. So we get it. We'll get his gift until he turns 18. So Apollo couldn't not agree with that. Okay, fine. So you'll be his mother, take care of him, and give him his intellectual property when he's 18. Yes, we'll do it. You promise? Yes. Okay, then he went to Zeus and said, will you oversee this? If I die in this war, will you oversee this, Dad? And Zeus said, sure, why not? Because ultimately he deserves it. I agree. So Helenus was now promised this gift. He received it in the time of the conflict of Troy. For the first time, he received intellectual property, which was an actual gift from the god Apollo himself. It was from the oracles of Delphi, or the ability as an oracle. The oracle of Delphi was exactly what Apollo was bestowing, the ability to be his own oracle, which was ultimately more than a fortune teller. It was ultimately a collective ability to tell fortunes or see the future or be a psychic, literally. So Helenus was happy about his reward. He received it. And ultimately, so I'm going to read some of this now, and I'm going to read some of what God narrated to me last night. So I'll have to kind of read between the lines. But so Apollo wanted to ensure that in the next life to come, Helenus would be guaranteed the right to receive his gift and use his gift. And there was a great responsibility that came with this gift of prophecy, which was given to Helenus. And if Helenus, having died and losing his memory from his death, comes back in the next lifetime, he won't remember anything. So the next incarnate life, having been completely erased and perhaps having already earned his gift now, he won't remember that. He won't remember he used to ever be a guy named, which would mean he'd lose all his memory. Well, Apollo knew this, and even Helenus knew this. But the plan is that he would have to meet two requirements that would guarantee his right to receive the gift. And the gods and goddesses promised if Apollo, the god, died for any reason, they would guarantee that they'd make sure he got that gift of prophecy in every lifetime to come, so far as he met two requirements. The first requirement was that in order to receive his gift of prophecy at the age of 18, the mother would have to keep it. So that means the goddess would be in charge of that intellectual property for 18 years. And he would have to prove genuine coupling with her. That means that he would have to do a spiritual coupling with his mother or the divine feminine. At 18 years old, it would have to be a genuine, true coupling that would be judged by the god Zeus, not by the mother, but by the god Zeus. So Zeus said, I'll see the kid when he's 18 years old and see if he's being really appropriate with his mother, with her, actually for real, that he's not pretending it or acting on it when it's not true. Because, of course, he would fail to meet the first requirement if he was not doing a genuine coupling with her. So his mentality and spirituality would be checked at 18. He would not be aware he was about to receive any gift. So understand that the chances that he would get his gift were probably next to none, having not even known about it. And truly, his mother may not know about it, although she'd feel it and want to keep it. She wouldn't want to give it to him. So ultimately, he would have to meet a second requirement of sharing information with the Divine Feminine Collective and women that was necessary for their spiritual development. Him being a high priest, there was certain information which was required to share with women who didn't have any idea of what was really going on. So the priest, part of the priest's duties was to be willing to share information that might be disadvantageous to share, or might even be not wanting to be shared. But ultimately, he had to agree, I'll share whatever information that she literally needs to be able to right herself if she's in trouble, and I won't fail to give it to her, meaning the priest has to promise that he won't keep information from her that she absolutely needs. It's up to his discretion as to whether she actually needs it or not. So the gods will be looking over his shoulder saying, are you being that great high priest or not? So he has to take a collective responsibility, in a sense, because of it. Because of the second requirement as a high priest to receive his gift of prophecy, once he does a genuine coupling with her, it can't be faked or pretended or acted like as if it's not real, or he can't certainly be just being nice to her to get something from her and it's not really sincere, because absolutely he'll be denied, meaning he will not even know that he has to meet two requirements at the age of 18. He won't even know that he's supposed to meet these two requirements. He won't even know that all that he wants is his gift. He won't even know he's got a gift coming. He'll certainly feel disappointment and a hopelessness, thinking like, I don't even know what's coming or what it is that I'm wanting. Ultimately, he'll be an 18-year-old kid saying like, I don't think I got a chance in hell of whatever I'm about to do next. And ultimately, in the next life, having already earned the gift, his sole right to it, if his soul was right to have the right to it, actually would have to have not failed to have met a few genuine but absolute requirements to actually be able to receive and actually have the right to use it. The first was that a coupling of his soul with that of another must intend to be a genuine, and a genuine coupling between the two souls was rare. If the coupling was not genuine, it could be acted out as or faked between two people who, if both souls were willing to participate in a false coupling, then the first requirement Hellenist could fail to meet, meaning that if he was not having a genuine relationship with a woman at the time, if it wasn't considered to be completely genuine by the gods, and they weren't going to tell him anything, so he certainly had every chance to be ingenuine. Certainly, if it wasn't 100% genuine, then he was going to be denied. He had to also share any information with her that she needed, and if he withheld anything that she needs to know, well, the gods would discern that. Like, did he not tell her anything that she needs to know? Well, ultimately, for 38 lifetimes after the conflict in Troy, he would meet the requirements and never receive his gift. So we're talking about, we're going to skip ahead, that Hellenist went through 38 lifetimes of meeting the requirements. He met both requirements in every lifetime and absolutely was for the divine feminine, genuine coupling, everything. He did it all perfectly for 38 lifetimes, never received his gift of prophecy once. Not only did he not even know he had a gift coming, he had no idea who he ever was before. So he didn't know he was a guy named Hellenist. He was a man that had been reborn and had no idea who he was, and probably thought he was nobody, and probably thought he was never had a life before. He probably thought he only had one life each life. And lifetime after lifetime, for 38 lifetimes, he literally failed to receive his gift for some reason. And he became very bent and absolutely twisted and angry and mad, especially the divine feminine, because the mother wasn't giving it to him at 18, or he was failing to meet the requirements over and over for 38 times until it became his being emotionally and mentally set against her, hating her, blaming her for everything, probably an alcoholic and probably, yeah, he got twisted and emotionally disturbed to the point of now it's not ever going to happen for him. So this gift that he was supposed to get was supposed to be a gift guaranteed to him in every lifetime after Troy. And Apollo, the god Apollo, went out of his way to hopefully get a full cooperation, including all the gods and goddesses, that they would all promise if Apollo died that they would take care of his favorite priest, because he wanted to be taken care of for an eternity because he loved him that much. He said there's no reason why he should ever be without or have a problem ever again, forever, whether I'm here or not. And ultimately, supposedly, Apollo believed that he got that promise from Zeus and the goddesses that they would say, yeah, under the conditions and agreements, they all agreed that Helenus would receive his gift every lifetime. What he would not ever receive was anybody telling him who he used to be, or that he even had a gift coming. So it would be very frustrating to him, because he would be very upset at the idea that I don't even understand what's going on, or that I even have any kind of gift coming to me. But ultimately, I don't even know that I'm already upset. I haven't got it for 38 lifetimes. And now I'm upset, and I'm not emotionally, I'm like so messed up that I'm angry and I'm mad, and I already don't meet the requirements, but I don't even want to meet him anymore. And ultimately he got all messed up to the point where he didn't ever meet him again, meaning he refused to meet him. I've spent 38 lifetimes meeting them, and I never got my gift. He couldn't even say those words to understand it, because he had no understanding. He didn't know who he ever was before, or that he even was before. So it was a very sad situation. So if Helenus had been willing to participate in a false coupling, then the first requirement Helenus would fail to meet, as humans that are not given a gift of prophecy by a god. In Apollo's case, Helenus needed to not fail to meet the first requirement. And Apollo certainly knew he could just tell him, so it wouldn't be a problem. So of course, Apollo could just tell him in his next lifetime, because Apollo is a god. He lives forever, right? Apollo was worried about himself being killed in the Trojan conflict. It was a war between gods and goddesses. Apollo had some foresight into what happens if I die. How is he going to get his guarantee? Certainly, part of the insights here I want to share with you is that Apollo did foresee his own death. I have the details here. So, aware in full that if he was killed as the god Apollo, as this was a time known as the Trojan War, and the Trojan War was a time of conflicts that included more than just men and their armies and their gods. In fact, this conflict was between the gods and goddesses themselves. And at the time, Apollo wanted to guarantee, should anything happen to him, that his favorite high priest would be eternally taken care of through his reincarnated karmic wheel forever. If he should lose his godness or was killed for any reason, he wanted to guarantee that his high priest would be safe. And ultimately, he thought he had it. The unfortunate catastrophe here was that not only did he not actually have it, but for 38 lifetimes, Helenus didn't get it over and over again. And every lifetime was a complete destruction. At 18 years old, he was such a emotional, destroyed person that he didn't even know that he didn't get it. He certainly didn't even know it had it coming to him. He was just an 18-year-old kid that said, no, like, my 18th year of my life was the worst. Like, my life just, I was destroyed by the time I was 19 years old. I don't even know what happened, but my emotions were like, whatever I should have been having a chance, no one gave it to me. And I hate everybody, and I hate you all, and I hate her. And ultimately that was Helenus, really angry. Didn't even know why. So he was killed, or if he was killed, having not to remember his favorite high priest who would be reincarnated. So Apollo presented his intentions to all the gods and the goddesses and had secured that, so he thought. Because of the loyalty and service that Helenus gave to his god Apollo, that it was unsurpassed, as Apollo felt this high priest of his was that he was that loyal, and so loyal in so many ways, and even went so far as their personal relationship to be observed by others as that they were actually more like lovers than a god and his high priest friends. But truly they weren't lovers. They were literally emotionally loving each other, like in that kind of way, like, yeah, like father and son, but even closer, God and high priest dedicated to God. The truth being Apollo deeply loved Helenus to the exact degree and extent that Helenus truly deeply loved Apollo. And it was a mirroring effect. So Apollo just loved Helenus exactly how much Helenus loved him. And he let Apollos decide that. So Apollo's love for Helenus was decided by Helenus himself, probably without his knowledge. He didn't actually know that his God loved him as much as he did because of his own love for his God. And so it was mirrored. Apollo had wanted to grant immortality to Helenus again, and the goddesses refused utterly any notion or idea of it being possible prior to this, declaring he was a Trojan egotistical man prone to every error of mankind, and likely outright refused the idea. So these goddesses said, absolutely no, will he never be honored by us as immortal or that great, because he's not that great. He's an ego dum-dum that we think is full of every error. That's what they said. Ultimately, the god Apollo absolutely didn't agree with the goddesses. He said, none of you know my high priest. He's more loyal than anything ever come before us. Ultimately, it set Apollo, the sun god, apart from his father and the goddesses pretty much as an incident. When Zeus had heard Apollo, his son, wanted to make Helenus his high priest and immortal, he had to agree somewhat with the goddesses and refused to agree it could be possible, as Helenus was a very loyal, or perhaps the most loyal priest to his god. Yet immortality was thought by Zeus to be a gift to the race of men, and a rare gift only given or considered for demigods or demigoddesses or heroes of legendary sorts. Men of renown, warriors of any kind that were extremely special and rare. Being loyal or dedicated alone was not only not sufficient to merit such a cause for rewards as immortality, but it was not even to be compared or as a comparison to be even looked at as possible. In the same ballpark, loyalty and dedication, no matter how great or how much to a god or goddess, was not enough to grant such a gift as immortality. A gift as rare as it was, only given by the gods to rare men on earth. Zeus refused to allow it. The goddesses refused to even consider the idea, and Apollo was struck and stuck with the task of trying to show his appreciation to his loyal servant that would be lost, hopefully be found more than in just one lifetime, if it was lost. So he consented with Zeus and the goddesses to agree he could receive the gift of prophecy in every lifetime, and lifetime after lifetime, if so anything happened to the god himself, he wanted to guarantee it. And his father Zeus and the father of the gods and goddesses agreed that if Apollo himself should die, that they would agree to grant and look after his high priest forever and give him that right forever, already as earned already. The right to it, should he for whatever reason not be able to do it himself. And the war between the gods and goddesses was just starting at this time. And so Apollo had some foresight into the possibility of his own death, and that humans may indeed, through a karmic wheel and what is called reincarnation, actually find a way to outlive and outlast the gods themselves and the goddesses. And ultimately, the destruction of man was less so in question, as the end to gods and goddesses forever was the actual issue. It was very possible that such a conflict would end in a possible annihilation of one or all of the gods or goddesses, or more likely, all but one, a supreme one, or a last god standing, in the end was the more likely result. And Zeus was the favored candidate for that, being so much more powerful than the other gods and goddesses even combined. So Zeus was thought to be the winner if it ever happened, because Zeus was strong enough to fight all of them at once, pretty much, and maybe win. So Zeus was favored as to be the one god left standing if the conflict should go totally bad. In the worst case scenario, the gods and goddesses go to a total war and want to kill each other literally. Well, then God kills all the other gods and goddesses to be the one god left standing in the end. And to ensure his own survival, it might be required to be a fact of the systematic extermination of all the gods and goddesses was a requirement, and just a fact that had to take place. The gods' last choice to destroy all who could possibly offer any substantial opposition in the future, they'd have to all be destroyed. If any time Zeus thought, like, my own life is in danger, he would have to, as a rule, kill them all. And that would be the only way he can guarantee his own safety. there in the end would be one God left, and he would be by himself as only one God. Apollo foresees his own destruction and is assassinated by Achilles. So I want to speak a little bit about what happened there. So this is just information in the mythology that I'm told from God, who told me this last night. He said that Apollo had foreseen his own destruction and all that he had set up for Helenus, that although he didn't know if he's going to die, and it's almost certain he wasn't because he's a god, ultimately he did. So he had foreseen his own destruction, and he was assassinated by Achilles. So let's talk for a minute about how that happened. So Apollo, the sun god, was in the temple of Apollo on the beaches of Troy. And the presence of Apollo, the sun god, was all over the beaches of Troy, which means that there was a standing presence of the sun god Apollo at the water's edge, which warded off all foreigners that might try to come in to wander around Trojan soil, or even think about maybe attacking or even doing anything aggressive. So the presence of Apollo was felt in the human collectives. So both the divine masculine and divine feminine collectives as a whole felt the presence of Apollo as a strong, very masculine, powerful god, and to be feared in many ways. Ultimately, he was a vengeful, disease-causing, plague-causing god, that if he didn't like you, well, certainly then if you didn't die from plague because of it, you would get some nasty disease. And ultimately, Apollo was just as capable of cursing someone to death as he was of blessing them to life. So people were very afraid of Apollo because they knew what he was. He was a god that didn't take any crap. And ultimately, if he didn't like you for some reason, or he wanted you removed, it was ultimately he would do it and you'd be dead. And he did it a lot, meaning he killed people. He inflicted plagues on entire cities. He killed people by the millions and did it all the time. And whenever he could, like whenever he decided it should be done, people needed to be exterminated, he would say. Whenever they are not deserving to live, well, he would decide and then carry out the punishment. He was a plague god and a god of diseases and inflicting diseases, which really made him feared more than any of the other gods, who usually killed you through conflicts like warfare, or maybe just outright by violence. Apollo used disease and plague more so than any other god or goddess who didn't use disease or plague as a rule. Apollo did it as a rule. So he was actually feared a lot. And the presence of Apollo would not be messed with, meaning all foreigners that came to Trojan soil were very much aware that that's where Apollo the god lives, and we will not even go there. We're not even going over there. So most navies that would even come in the vicinity of Troy during those times would not even get near it. They'd certainly feel it from way far away. Don't even go near that place, because unless you want to die, ultimately unless you're invited, and then it'd be okay. But that's what Apollo wanted people to think and feel, and he had a very strong presence that was kind of a shock effect of that, which means that it was really a terrifying presence to feel his presence. It could rout armies, the idea of it. So Apollo was killed by Achilles, who was under a goddess screen. A goddess screen is what means that the goddess is hid from his view. Achilles coming towards the beaches to attack by surprise Apollo's temple and Apollo himself. So if we're going to say Apollo escaped death, we're going to say that whatever happened in that temple that day, when Achilles attacked with his 50 myrmidons at first, whatever happened that day was that the god Apollo's presence was removed from the entire Troy conflict, and it was removed that day when Achilles landed on the beach by himself in one ship with his 50 myrmidons, and the entire Greek fleet was out to sea still, about 5 hours out, and they could not approach. The reason why the Greek fleet could not approach is because they were warded off by Apollo's presence, so that Achilles himself with his 50 myrmidons, under what they call a goddess screen, and under his absolute protection of his mother Thetis, who was a full-fledged goddess, was also working with Minerva and Artemis and Hera, they were all in on it. And so what they wanted to do was put Achilles on the beach by surprise. And the ultimate trick of the situation was to deceive the god Apollo into not seeing Achilles coming. And if Achilles could achieve surprise against Apollo and enter his temple without Apollo knowing it, well, Achilles could get close enough to Apollo to behead him and kill the god. And ultimately, if you behead a god, you would kill him. So even gods couldn't live if their head was removed utterly and taken as a prize. They would not be able to survive with that head. So it would just never happen because there was no human on earth, literally, that could do it. So what I'm told is that there was not a human being on earth that had the wherewithal or ability to kill a god. And the thought of a man being able to kill a god was not only unheard of, but thought to be not possible. And even by the gods and goddesses themselves, who were actually in error thinking that. Because understand, not only was it thought that there's no such possible way that a man would possibly be able to kill a god like Apollo, it could just not happen. There's no chance for it. That they believe that. And even the gods and goddesses believe that. But the goddesses actually were going to make Achilles an expendable and convinced him to do it, so that Achilles agreed to go to that temple, attack the temple of Apollo, and he was told Apollo is inside and will not know you're there, because the goddesses were busy doing some kind of magic on Achilles and his ship to keep it cloaked from Apollo's all-seeing eyes. Apollo was inside the temple, and he was literally watching the entire Greek fleet off 5 hours out, and they couldn't approach any closer. And Apollo was very aware why they're not coming. Well, they can't come. They certainly can't, no matter what, because they won't be able to bring themselves to approach, because the presence of Apollo's protection on the beaches was too great, too godlike, too powerful. The Greek fleet was warded off. They were like, whoa, we can't get near that place, even though we want to. And so the first requirement was somehow Apollo's protective presence of the beaches of Troy had to be removed. And Achilles was tasked with the secret mission of a complete surprise attack under the goddess screen of Artemis, Hera, Minerva, and Thetis, his mother, who were all in on it and absolutely were banking on the fact that if Achilles actually can do it, the truth of the matter is they thought that probably Apollo will see him coming and ultimately kill Achilles instead, which is more likely to happen. And ultimately, so the goddesses expected that Achilles would probably be the one to die in this endeavor. But Thetis, even his mother, was agreeing without even telling Achilles any of this. She agreed to, well, it's worth it, because if he actually kills Apollo, well, then we will succeed in getting rid of the egotistical god that we call a man. We don't like that ego god, Apollo. He likes egos and supports men that are egotistical and bad. Well, that's what they felt and thought. So Achilles didn't care if he lived or died, because he figured Achilles was so bent on wanting to be never forgotten, and he wanted his name remembered, that Achilles was fully aware that the chances he could go actually assault Apollo by surprise and actually get there by surprise was very slim. But he also was aware that if he did achieve complete surprise, there was still a very good chance Apollo could easily take him out with the sword himself. Apollo was a god, much greater than sword fighting with a man. And ultimately, Achilles wanted to never be forgotten. His mother said to Achilles, if you do this for us, if you attack that temple, attack Apollo, if he's in there, behead him, chop his head off, he'll be dead. If you achieve this complete surprise, we're going to cover your screen. He won't know you're coming. Ultimately, Achilles believed his mother, and that maybe he won't know. But ultimately, the truth was Thetis thought he probably will know, and just lied to her son. I'm telling you, that's what I was told, that she was literally going to let Achilles die in the attempt, hoping that instead it went for their favor. In fact, Achilles had very little chance of actually pulling it off, but it actually happened, and he did pull it off. He achieved complete surprise when he landed on the beach. Apollo was watching the Greek fleet 5 hours out to sea, and Apollo was keenly aware of where every Greek warrior was, every last one. They were still many hours away out to sea coming. He was planning on leaving the temple in a few hours to take any position to fight the Greek fleet and destroy it. But he hadn't left yet. He didn't see Achilles coming because he felt the goddesses coming. So what Apollo sensed when Achilles was coming towards the beach was his sister Artemis and his mother coming. He ultimately overlooked it because they were coming, those energies were coming through women and high priestesses. They were all around that area, which meant the presence of the goddesses was everywhere, and including all around and inside Apollo's temple. He had many high priests that were straight connected to Artemis, his mother, Thetis, Hera. So it was not only normal to have those goddess presences with him in the temple, but they were living with him in the temple, those goddess presences. So they weren't just coming to approach him necessarily. They were already there with him constantly. He was used to that presence of the goddess. When he saw it coming, he probably saw Achilles coming. He thought it was high priestesses coming, or his mother or his sister coming. He would have just overlooked it and kept looking at the men and the Greek fleet. So it truly was a success. The goddesses had fooled the god Apollo into not seeing it. He missed it because he thought Achilles was a goddess coming to him, and he didn't know. And ultimately, when Achilles charged the temple, he probably thought that Achilles was a high priestess in his temple already or coming in, but he wouldn't have been alarmed because when Achilles came in, he was very quick-footed, but ultimately not running that fast. He was told not to run too fast, run like a fireman runs, like a fast walk. Ultimately, they knew how to trick him, hopefully, and it worked. They tricked him. Achilles entered the temple, went into the bedchamber of Apollo, and beheaded him. Immediately, Apollo didn't even know he was beheaded. He was ultimately he didn't see Achilles even coming in the room. Achilles got him, killed him, beheaded him, took his head for prize, and the war was over in Troy. So the war was done. The war in Troy was over before Achilles left the beach. When Achilles hit the beach, the entire war of Troy was about removing the ego presence of the god Apollo, who was a man supporter and not known for caring much about the women or the divine feminine. He would treat them like daughters or women and look down on them like lessers. It was just the way that he was. He was respectful, but he didn't see women as equals. He saw them as daughters and wives that should be obedient. So he ultimately screwed. So Apollo got the bad luck, like he didn't see it coming. And he was a god known as the god that does not miss and sees all. So Apollo was actually known for his ability to see all things and not miss anything. And he was renowned for his exclusive ability to be an all-seeing god that you can't push nothing past him. He will see everything you're doing. And they all believed it. Even the gods and goddesses believed that Apollo couldn't be fooled. And ultimately, Achilles was expected to be the dead man on that day. But because Apollo was actually fooled, they were all shocked. And Achilles actually was victorious because he went in there and all he wanted to do was cut that god's head off so he could go down in history as never to be forgotten. And ultimately, Thetis and all the goddesses promised Achilles, if he killed Apollo, that his name will go down in history as Achilles, the greatest fighter that ever lived, the greatest legend, and that to all generations to come, for all time of the human race, if the human race is still here, that they told Achilles, you will be sung about in schools. Every child in every school in 5,000 years from now will know your name, Achilles, the greatest fighter that ever lived. And so he was just for that. Understand that. Achilles was literally just wanting to never be forgotten forever, and that was good enough for him. If you can now see how shallow he might have been, it would kind of seem very immature that he would be so willing to pay with such a high price, as the chances he had were almost none to succeed, but he did. So ultimately, Apollo the god was the one destroyed. Now Achilles, suddenly the war's over because Achilles just removed the entire presence of the entire god Apollo. It's protecting the entire coast of Troy. Now it's gone. Now the Greek fleet, 5 hours out, is suddenly able to come forward and land on the beaches unopposed. So understand that the Greek fleet was warded off by the presence of the god Apollo. They could not approach, no matter how hard Agamemnon wanted to come forward. He would have told you, like, we'd want to come forward, but we can't do it. Like, that god's too powerful for us. You have to kill him or remove him first. And so ultimately, the entire Greek fleet was waiting out to sea for Achilles to do his one little mission. And he did. He took care of it. Now the war's over, and they don't need to carry this conflict on anymore. But now that Agamemnon's got 1,000 ships out off the coast, he's certainly not ready to end the conflict or think it's over. And he didn't even know what happened yet. So Agamemnon is now that they can move forward. As soon as Agamemnon found it in his head that he could move forward, it was only because he could. And that meant that Apollo was either dead or his presence was utterly removed from the beaches, which meant Achilles succeeded utterly. Um, Now Agamemnon arrives on the beach 5 hours later, and Achilles is already there and has Apollo's head as a prize. So he's probably carrying around the dead god's head in his hands. But ultimately, in the movie, it was ultimately the head of a statue that he had beheaded. And so in the mythology, they actually don't say Apollo himself was killed. When Achilles attacked the temple, they only say that, and they don't say anything. They ultimately show you that he decapitated a statue of Apollo in front of the temple, which was a statue only, not the actual god himself. You could just see that fact. But the symbolic relation to the movie, which I'll say I was told was more than symbolic relation. So the god told me Apollo was actually killed that day, or his presence was removed permanently by whatever Achilles did. And it was a lot more than just beheading a statue. So I thought that was very interesting. So now that Agamemnon and his fleet arrive, the whole entire Greek fleet arrives at Troy now. They all can come in hard and strong because Apollo's gone. His presence is no longer protecting the beaches. And so the Greeks are totally brave, coming in fast, no opposition. And the whole entire fleet lands. And Achilles is already there, probably carrying around Apollo's head, saying, look, I got his ass. And all the goddesses are happy. So basically, all the goddesses are just completely surprised and shocked. Like, oh my gosh, you did it, Achilles. You're going to be famous forever. No one will forget your name. So why did Achilles literally get that to become a legend forever and be in mythology? Because of, well, it's just what I was told. The actual truth was, yeah, what he did was a man actually killed a god. It was thought to be, even by the gods and goddesses, to be impossible. There's no man on earth that could kill a god. It just can't happen. Don't tell me it could. And even the gods and goddesses would say, no way, not a possibility. So if you had asked any of them, could Achilles kill Apollo? They would have all said, not a chance. And so would even the gods and goddesses had said that. So it was a big shock to everyone when suddenly Apollo was dead. But ultimately, in the mythology, Apollo plagues the hell out of the Greek fleet when it arrives after the high priest of Apollo, who was actually a different man than Helenus, went to get his daughter ransomed. And ultimately, Agamemnon disrespected him, and he had Apollo's scepter in his hand. So another high priest of Apollo was trying to get his daughter, who had been taken hostage from Agamemnon. And Agamemnon was a king of Mycenae, and ultimately was just a powerful king that was king of many countries, not just his own. And he ruled many different countries, not just his own. Agamemnon was really war hungry and had invested so much time and energy in creating this fleet and all this greatest army ever to be assembled in the history of the world. Agamemnon was really like ready to go. And it's like, no, we're not just quitting this war now. We got to finish it, and it has to go all the way. So we're going to put our resources all the way to the test, and it would be another 10 years of war that would have to happen before Troy would be eventually sacked. Now we're going to go back to Helenus prepares to spend the first 7 years of the war trying to resolve the conflict between the two divine collectives, the masculine and the feminine. So for the first 7 years of the 10-year war in Troy, Helenus is trying to resolve a conflict between the divine feminine collective, which is made of the Trojan women in society of Troy, and the divine masculine men of the Trojan society, which are the husbands of those women, and also a masculine collective. So there's a masculine collective that consists of the men of Troy, and a feminine collective, which consists of the women of Troy. And the women and the men of Troy and the collectives are at full civil war and battle. And they've been battling before the war of Troy even occurs, before it's even attacked or assaulted. They were at war for a while, and Apollo was trying to settle that war, but he was ultimately against the women of Troy. And Apollo, the sun god, blamed the women of Troy and the divine feminine collective for being the fault of the conflict. So he did not blame the men of Troy or the ego. He said the men are not at fault. The women are the ones trying to usurp power and be goddesses in charge here. And ultimately, Apollo said, if the goddesses want to be goddesses, well, they are goddesses. But if the women of Troy think they can be goddesses too, well, they certainly can't, in the sense that they can't claim to want that power, demand it, because ultimately the women of Troy, the wives of the husbands of Troy, were both individually either in charge or not, or as a collective, wanted to take full control over the men. And the men would not have it. So there was an all-out war between the men and women of Troy in the collectives fighting, and Apollo was trying to solve the issue at the time when the goddesses decided Apollo should die for blaming the women and the divine feminine collective. He certainly did. He said that everything that she's doing is false. Everything that she's presenting is a lie. Everything that she's promoting as far as her sincerity is not sincere. Everything that is a game to her is also being played as a game, and she hides that from view and also pretends that with you. And it's not anything like that. It's all this. It's all me. It's all just man. Ultimately, Apollo, the god, did not like the Trojan women or what they were doing. It was why the goddesses would agree to assassinate him using Achilles. Their slim chance paid off. In the 7th year, Helenus is confronted by a new unknown god. So this is a part that comes in the 7th year. After 7 years, Helenus is coming to his conclusion, and it's ultimately because he has contact with a new unknown mysterious god, and information is given to him. And as a result, he comes to a bitter conclusion that no resolution is even remotely possible between the two sides. That in fact, Helenus is a high priest of Troy. He's a high priest to Apollo. He's also trying to resolve the conflict in Troy that's happening between Trojan men and women, not even including the conflict between the Greeks and the Trojans that had just not even started yet. He was trying to fix it, and some unknown god came to him and said, you need to have this information. And he suddenly realized, oh, wow, I've been doing this for 7 years, and there's no way they're going to. So what did Helenus come to? What did he realize? Well, Helenus didn't want to realize this. It was very disappointing to him. He was not wanting this to come to his head. He didn't want to have this realization. He was trying to find something that could work, that would be working with them. He wanted that for them too, but he was even willing to be that for them if they could also be that for him. And they would only do this, hide and be secretive and actually pretend that they were doing that, but they were really actually being women that were just secretive and wouldn't admit the truth. So a husband would say, wife, you're so wrong. You're like a witch. I should burn you at the stake. You know, you're dishonest. You lie to me. You live to overrule me or usurp my ability. Meaning these women in Troy were the first women that were considered to be quote unquote women in the world that were bad or witches or anything wrong. And Helenus literally gets this information given to him and suddenly realizes for 7 years, I'm suddenly realizing there's no way this is going to end this, but 3 more years of warfare and the fall of Troy is almost imminent, which means that Helenus was perfectly aware that after 7 years, there was no way the women were going to relent to the men, and the men were not going to give women authority as goddesses. They were not going to be able to be godheads. Absolutely not a chance. And even the god said not a chance. Zeus certainly said no to his wife and daughter. You may not rule as godheads. You're only wife and daughter. And ultimately, even Zeus threatened to kill Minerva, calling her a vixen, because Zeus told his wife and daughter, if you two want to overthrow me or think you're going to be godheads, well, I'm the godhead and men are godheads. The Trojan men are ruling society and women do not rule it, and they may not. So ultimately, Hera was really upset with Zeus for that demand and declaration. And ultimately, Minerva was also trying to convince her dad that the men were actually wrong, and her dad was giving Minerva every chance to prove it to him. If the egotistical men of Troy are so wrong and bad, darling, why don't you show me where they're going wrong? I would like to see it. They're going to listen to anything I tell them, and they'll do whatever I want. So certainly they won't be wrong if I tell them not to be, and I'll tell them not to be. So Zeus was trying to tell Minerva, you two, you and mom are being absolutely uncalled for wrong. And Zeus didn't even have to give him any chance, but Zeus was trying to be fair and say if Hera and Minerva could prove that the men of Troy were such bad, egotistical bastards that should die, well, ultimately Zeus said, I want to see the proof. Show me one man is wrong to his wife or beats her, or does wrong to her, doesn't care. And ultimately they were mad because they couldn't do it. It just kind of fed the fire. They were really determined to get rid of their dad. So ultimately this was a war that would end up Zeus would have to face Hera and Minerva at some time and even fight to the death with them. So I'll suggest there was a time later in the war where Zeus was at first in semi-cooperation with his daughters, letting them have some kind of authority in some way, but ultimately realizing the more authority he gave them, the more they usurped and wanted more, and that any authority was too much to give them, because any authority they took, they wanted it all, and they weren't willing to give, which meant he realized, I can't share this power with my daughters and my wife, not even slightly, not even in any degree, which meant when Zeus's patience had ended and he threatened his wife to kill her and threatened his daughter to kill her, he literally told them, if you two don't stop and become obedient immediately, I will kill both of you. You will be dead and never to return. So it was a big threat. And I think he meant it. So Hellenus meets a new god, never seen or known by even the gods or goddesses themselves. Hellenus is contacted by a mysterious godlike entity. This had happened in the 7th year of where when he realized it, whenever this god came to Hellenus, he couldn't see him. He certainly felt him. It was whatever his presence was like, who are you? It was an unknown god. He carried no name. He didn't identify himself, or as not important was his identity. My identity is not important. And ultimately I'm a new god, brand new. And I'm just here now. And the gods don't even know I'm here. The goddesses don't even know I'm here. So this new god that came to Hellenus in the 7th year was giving him the information, which showed Hellenus what he needed to see. And Hellenus saw it and said, I can't believe what you're showing me. Like, basically what this says is Troy needs to fall. It's my country. It's my country. My own country has to go down because it won't learn. It's not going to learn, and it won't cooperate. It's faking everything. It's pretending cooperation, but it's really trying to destroy itself secretly. So the godlike mysterious entity is providing the information on the possible inevitable fall of Troy and possibly the utter destruction of all the gods and goddesses. So that the most unbelievable thing that this mysterious god told Hellenus was, this is not about your men and women of Troy or Troy being sacked. This is a war between the gods and goddesses, and there are likely to be, all of them will die. There will be no gods and goddesses left alive either, which means that the gods and goddesses are about to go to complete war and kill each other off, every one of them to the death fight. So Hellenus suddenly realized this and thought, oh, like, wow, I can't believe it got that bad. Hellenus is told he may meet the Greeks soon and give them the information they need to bring about the destruction and total fall of Troy. Hellenus is told if Troy falls, he will either be enslaved and rewarded eventually his freedom for his captors for supplying them with certain information. And the unknown mysterious god that came to Hellenus told Hellenus, I'm going to tell you some information that you can go tell the Greeks, that if you tell them the way that I told you to tell them, that it'll give them a chance to sack Troy, only if they're actually deserving it. So you won't be betraying them. So in other words, Hellenus was told by this mysterious god that you're not going to betray Troy by giving the Greeks the information to sack Troy. What you're going to be doing is providing the Greeks with a chance to make some good decisions on their own. And if they make these good decisions, these Greeks, then they're going to be having a result, which is Troy will fall, because the Trojan men and women are so busy fighting in Troy that they're both considered wrong by Athena, the goddess. Which meant that the Trojan men and women that were fighting in Troy, it was a civil war, had nothing to do with the Greeks or the invading armies. So the Troy was already under complete scrutiny by all the gods, and Athena was a goddess of Troy in charge of the entire Trojan conflict. And Athena was also responsibly singly for blessing the walls of Troy. It's why they couldn't be penetrated, alongside with other gods that had blessed. Poseidon, Apollo built the walls of Troy actually, and Athena blessed them. So Athena had blessed those walls actually after Apollo and Poseidon built them, and they were built by the gods. No one could get through those walls. And they tried for the entire 10 years and failed. Even the god Eris failed to get through the walls. So a god couldn't even breach those walls. Hellenus was told that if Troy falls, he will be enslaved for a while. And then he would be rewarded and given his freedom. And he would become king of many lands if he did what he was told. And the unknown god that was mysterious, that he didn't know who this god was. He certainly knew it was none of the ones he knew of before. He was completely surprised, and I don't know whoever this god is real, but I don't know who he is. And ultimately, he was given spectacular information. So Hellenus is warned that if he may be captured and tortured to death as well instead. So instead of being rewarded, he's told that if he does not get rewarded and first enslaved and then become king and rewarded and over many lands, well, he might be tortured to death and killed instead before Troy even falls. So the two possibilities were you either get tortured to death and die when you go tell them this information, or they accept you and are pleased with you for giving the information. They make the right choices, and then they actually want to be your friend and reward you for helping them sack Troy rather than just kill you because you're a Trojan idiot like the rest of the Trojan idiots that need to fall. And ultimately, the right thing the Greeks were going to have to do was make a decision not to look at him as just an idiot Trojan ego that was like the rest of them that should all die. Ultimately, that was the problem, and the possibility was he was just another man of Troy, like all of the men were going to be destroyed and every one of them was going to die. The goddesses wanted to murder every last Trojan man, and including all the masculine collective in Troy had to die. They declared it, which meant that Helenus knew that his two ends were to either have a great ending, which was if I go give this information to these Greeks, if I'm sincere and make all the right choices, I don't even know what that means, but I have to do everything right and proper and be sincere. Yeah, most of all, be sincere and understand you're not betraying Troy. You're giving the Greeks a chance to betray themselves, and they won't be able to sack Troy. But if they make the right decisions, they'll be able to sack Troy because they made the right decisions. And what's the right decision besides not blaming Helenus, who's loved by Apollo as the greatest high priest ever? Well, that would be absolutely it. I mean, the Greeks would know that they don't know who Helenus is or not, but that's the high priest that's favored by the god Apollo. Don't tell me that we're going to make accusations at him like he's a lowlife, dirtbag alcoholic ego, when the gods would and the goddesses would all know it's wrong and such a lie. That the Greeks would have, they'd have a chance to accuse Helenus and then also not get with Athena. So what did the Greeks need to do? Well, in the story, they needed to steal a statue of a Palladium that was in the temple of Athena, and Athena had still agreed to be the protection over Troy. But since Apollo was dead, or his presence was removed now and he was out of the game, or he was attacking everybody with his bow from way far off in some other land because he had been removed basically by Achilles. So basically, once they got Apollo out of the way, and ultimately Poseidon was nowhere to be found, Poseidon agreed not to come in and even be a participant in the fight because he was maybe just backing off for the goddesses' sake. Let the goddesses fight the gods, and I'll just sit here and watch. Ultimately, Poseidon didn't choose to be involved, and Apollo was probably dead or injured in somewhere else, fighting from afar. So the only thing that was left there in that whole arena was the gods and goddesses to fight it out. Helenus is informed again by the mysterious god, if he is not a dead man soon, he will survive to be king over many lands, and the new Troy he will be king over. And he's told that the relationship between Athena, the god, who was also a goddess, and the Trojan masculine collective was not required to worship a divine feminine. So this is now information that's pretty interesting. So there was goddesses of Troy. Among them were Artemis and Hera. Ultimately, there was temples of Hera and Artemis, Minerva, many of them, of all those goddesses. But Hera was a divine feminine only, purely 100%. Minerva was a mixture of divine masculine and feminine as a goddess that was 50% feminine, and also a goddess that had 50% masculinity in her. So Minerva had masculine and feminine as a goddess. Hera did not have any masculine, just feminine only. And Artemis was feminine only also. So the goddess Artemis, which was the brother of Apollo, or the sister of Apollo, the sister of Apollo, Artemis, was 100% feminine as a goddess. So she had no masculinity in her either. But yet Athena, the goddess, was 100% masculine and had no feminine in her at all, which meant that Athena was the only goddess that was lacking 100% feminine. She had no feminine in her as a goddess. What does that really mean? Athena came from her dad's forehead and ultimately came right out of it. So the mythology says that she was born from Zeus's forehead when he had a headache and pulled Athena out in full armor with a sword. His daughter just came right out of his forehead. Basically, the mythology is telling you a story, of symbolic story, which means that it meant that her mother was not there, that she was a god. So Athena, the goddess, is, if you know and you're privy to this information, you would know back then that the only goddess that's actually Not a goddess really, but she is, because she is female, but she doesn't have femininity in her. She has masculinity only because she has her dad. She is her dad. So Athena is Zeus, actually, her father. She's 100% her father. So she's a goddess that's 100% masculine, her father, actually. And so where's her femininity? She doesn't have any. She's not a goddess then. She's a god. So what does this mean? It means that Athena is a goddess that's actually thought to be a god if you didn't actually see her feminine body showing herself to you. If Athena came near you or approached you, you would think it was a god you were dealing with. So if you didn't see Athena because she didn't show herself physically, you would think, this is a god I'm talking to. And she could say, no, it's Athena, the goddess, but you're just feeling my dad, and I'm 100% him. So then wait a minute. Athena is a god, and the only goddess that is. Yes, the only goddess that is actually considered quote unquote a god. So Athena was the only one put in charge of Athena was the only one put in charge of Troy as a goddess. That the Trojan men and women of Troy were told, you have to absolutely, you can't lose Athena. She's the goddess we want you. She's the one we give authority to. So Zeus told the Trojan men and women who might not have known anything about this, that Athena is your goddess. And if you want to worship Artemis or Minerva or Hera, that's fine. But Zeus would have told everybody in Troy, including all the women and men, that the goddess of Troy is Athena, my daughter, and that only she has authority. Zeus probably wouldn't have told anybody but the few who knew the secret, which was, well, yeah, Athena is the only goddess empowered in Troy that has actually got authority, because none of the other goddesses do, because Zeus took it away from all of them, including his wife, and said that only Athena, my daughter, who's me actually, gets authority. And because Zeus gave it to Athena only, it was just because she was the only goddess that was actually 100% God first. So he actually was getting away with something. He told the Trojan men and women, you can't lose the goddess. If you lose the goddess, you will not even know what's happening, but you will be destroyed, all of you. So the women collective of Troy did not necessarily know Athena was a god. Actually, they would have thought they were all goddesses and just thought they were all the same. So it would have been okay to get rid of Artemis or reject Hera, or Zeus wouldn't mind. And ultimately, if you were anybody in Troy that didn't want Artemis or Hera or Minerva to be goddesses, you could hate them and you didn't have to follow them, and Zeus didn't care. You certainly would not be punished. But if you actually got rid of Athena or disrespected her in any way or her authority, you would not only be punished immediately, but badly. And it would be a strong, severe punishment. Ultimately, probably wouldn't be told. So you'd never be explained any of this, which meant that no one even knew that out of all the goddesses they had in Troy, when the Trojan men, the two collectives in Troy, started to fight, they were ultimately not aware that Athena was the only, well, they were aware Athena's the only one that gets authority, but they did not know that she was a god. They would have thought, it really probably doesn't matter if I follow Athena, or maybe if I lose Athena, but I still have Hera, right? Because she's the wife of Zeus. Ultimately, Zeus would have said, no, you may not have my wife. She's not a goddess, but you could have my daughter, who is a god, actually. And he didn't tell anybody that. You see, so the entire mistake of what happened to Troy on a level of complete catastrophe was that both collectives, the Trojan men and women combined in a whole Trojan society, all thought that they could disrespect the goddesses and stop giving them respect, because Zeus was getting so mad at Hera and Minerva and Artemis that he actually told the Trojans they did not have to follow Artemis, Hera, or Minerva, and didn't have to listen to them. In fact, suggested do not listen to anything they tell you. And so the Trojans were up to translate that for what they were being told. Zeus did not mention to him that. He only said, Athena, my daughter, is the only authority in Troy, and do not lose her, for if you lose the goddess, Troy will fall. That includes either men or women, meaning they both must have Athena. And that means that the men and women of Troy must they cannot afford to lose Athena, or else it's over for Troy. It will be sacked. And so basically, they all believed, though, that like there was no difference between Athena, the goddess, and all the other ones. So they started to disrespect the goddesses. Many of the men made the most critical mistake in the divine masculine collective of Troy. The Trojan egotistical men, they made a huge mistake, and they were drinking alcohol. They certainly were saying Zeus hates the goddesses. We don't even know Athena's a god. No one even explained this to us. Oh, well, then you're in trouble, because you're about to dismiss the goddesses off, all of them, including Athena, aren't you? Well, that's what Zeus is doing. Our God himself is dismissing them. Well, you don't know that Zeus didn't even tell you that his daughter Athena is a god, not a goddess, which means if you dismiss the goddesses and you include Athena in there, you just made a mistake, which cost you your life. Guaranteed Troy falls. It'll be why. Which meant that Zeus wasn't going to tell anybody this. He certainly wasn't going to tell the men, the egos, what was really going on, but the men were told, do not lose Athena. If you lose Athena, you lose the goddess and you will fall. And the men thought, yeah, but you're telling us we don't have to have Hera or Artemis, right? Or Minerva, because they're bitches. Well, yeah, but they were not even aware of that, meaning the men were fooled. The egos didn't even see it. They were ignorant. They missed the point. They didn't know all the information. And so the men in the Trojan society as a divine masculine collective rejected the goddesses, all three of them, Hera, Minerva, and Artemis together, and then Athena too, thinking Athena was just one of them. And although they weren't thinking about Athena, because Athena wasn't the one in question, they did know she was the only one that had the authority according to Zeus, and they were told this, which meant they were just going to get rid of the three that weren't Athena and then just not disrespect Athena. And they all thought they were going to be, quote unquote, keeping their goddess. But the unfortunate thing is when Athena saw this happen, she saw what the ego men of Troy were doing. They were dismissing her as well, and then also saying they didn't dismiss her because, after all, they didn't know that she's a god. And understand, if they did dismiss her, they dismissed Zeus, not her. So understand the repercussions for the catastrophe and what was about to happen was beyond anything. Shocking doesn't describe it, because understand, if Athena was a goddess, to reject the goddesses would only be a lethal consequence if you rejected actually Athena. So if you actually rejected only the other three goddesses and not Athena, well, if you could actually reject three of the four, but not the fourth, well, if it could actually happen because Athena was a god, well, then it wouldn't be that hard for the Trojan men, would it? Because they'd say, well, if Athena's a god, then she doesn't have feminine in her, right? Right. So do we have to give the divine feminine any respect? No, because Athena doesn't have any divine feminine. Zeus said, my daughter's not divine feminine, she's divine masculine. So, but he didn't tell them that. You see, they didn't know. So what they did was they disrespected the three that had feminine, Hera, Minerva, and Artemis, and then thought they were just going to say, well, Athena's in charge, and that's fine. We're not going to reject Athena too. But because they did reject Athena, they just said they're not going to reject Athena. Let me tell you, they did reject Athena. And you know what they actually did then? Not reject the fourth goddess, but they rejected the first god, who's a goddess too, which meant that by rejecting Athena, they didn't truly reject any goddesses. They rejected the god himself. And guess who he was? Zeus, her father, which meant that they made a catastrophic mistake in why Troy had to be sacked, why it had to go down, and even Zeus had to allow it to go down. Because if you deny my daughter Athena, who's me, well, in denying her, you're denying me, actually, which means that whether I told you this or not, if you do it, you already did it. It's too late. So the Trojan men fighting Trojan women and them in a big frenzy of battle and refusing to give up and holding grudges and never going to give in forever. And who cares who dies? And I'm killing your ass now. It was that bad. And so ultimately the Trojan society failed to do what it was supposed to do. And Athena, when she saw this, she said, the men of Troy have rejected me along with the other three goddesses and don't know that they actually rejected my dad, not the other three goddesses. And they were allowed to reject the goddess, but not the god. And utterly, it's the disaster of disasters because now they've rejected the goddess and the god. And ultimately, Zeus saw that. So now you're all dead. And ultimately, that was the absolute decision brought down on Troy. Even before they started falling, they were destroyed. Athena, when Diomedes and Ulysses went to steal the palladium from Athena's temple, they were told by Helenus if they can steal the palladium, then then they'll be able to sack Troy, because basically what it meant was there was a statue of Athena called the Palladium. It was a wooden statue in the temple of Athena in Troy. If Diomedes and Ulysses or Odysseus entered the city, and they did as beggars, they were disguised. They came into the city, they were disguised as just beggars, went into the temple of Athena and saw the Palladium there, and then basically covertly grabbed a hold of it, stole it, and left the city with it. Basically, Athena knew this was happening, and when Odysseus and Diomedes were coming, Athena was already expecting them, and she was going to allow them to steal the palladium and get away with it if they were sincere when they took the palladium into their possession at the time they stole it, if they were giving every supplication to every respect to the goddess Athena, if they were saying, like, we're stealing you because we're trying to take you from this bad Troy. Like, ultimately, Athena was going to say, if you do this correctly, I'll let you do it, but I'll leave with you voluntarily. So what happened when Diomedes and Odysseus stole the palladium of Athena? Well, it was actually Athena saying, if you even can do it, it's because I'm coming with you, not because you're stealing anything, because you can't steal me or my presence from Troy. Only I could decide that it can be stolen by giving it to you. So, and they didn't know this, which meant that Diomedes and Odysseus were thinking they could steal Athena from the temple and then secure a victory somehow, which was kind of true. Because in a sense, if they could actually get that statue out of Troy, it was because Athena allowed it. And that meant she approved that they can steal her, but they can't. She went with them. Ultimately, the case was when they went in that temple, they were both being sincere, and their reasons and intentions were sincere enough that Athena looked down upon Troy. She was a protector of Troy for so many years, and up until the moment where Athena switched sides. Athena said, I'm no longer for Troy. In fact, it has to fall and be sacked. I'm going to the Greek side now, over to their side, since they're really actually being sincere, wanting to respect me, which is my father, which meant that all that they were really doing was, by respecting Athena and following her, all they were really doing was following Zeus, and they already were following Zeus. Do you understand how easy it was for these men to not be in so much trouble? And the men of Troy screwed up big time because the men could have had it so easy. There was no way they're going to fall. These men only had to follow Zeus in order to follow Athena, and they were following Zeus. But because they didn't know Athena was not a goddess, actually, they actually rejected and hated on Athena too, and didn't know what their catastrophic mistake was. That she's not, don't hate on Athena, you're hating on Zeus. And they thought they weren't hating on Zeus. They could secretly hate on Athena, but not Zeus. And ultimately, not only did Zeus see that clearly, but Athena saw that clearly. And so did Artemis, Hera, and Minerva. So there was a mysterious god that showed up and told Helenus this stuff, and told Helenus that if he did end up dead and soon, that it would be because of his own doing, which meant that Helenus was aware at this time that whatever happens to Helenus will be of his own doing. Helenus knew that if I'm careful, if I do everything like I'm supposed to, showing respect and supplicating and trying to be, I'm a careful high priest and I'm not going to make a mistake. I only have to be respectful and do everything I'm supposed to do, make all the right decisions. It shouldn't be that hard to survive. It certainly shouldn't be that hard. I shouldn't be tortured and captured. There should be no one that wants me dead, not even the enemy, because ultimately Helenus in the long run was in contact with this mysterious god who was the enemy, but he wouldn't have known that. He certainly was talking to him and was with him because he ultimately was intrigued by all the information, and it was unbelievable, and ultimately believed it. Achilles is tricked into an ambush by Paris and friends and is murdered, and Paris attempts to feed Achilles to the vultures and the dogs. So basically, Achilles is told he's going to do some priest rites in a temple of Athena, and Achilles is trying to do the right thing, and so he's saying, until we finish sacking Troy, whenever, like, I'll participate in this respecting of goddesses thing in this event. So Achilles was believing he was going to some goddess event of respecting maybe Athena. So he agreed to do it, and he was invited by Trojan men who were his enemy that said, if you come help us, Achilles, it could help our peace talks, negotiations be better. And ultimately, Achilles agreed to do it because he wanted to help the Greeks and the Trojans. So he actually wanted to help the Trojans too. He was on both sides or on the fence. And so ultimately the two people that invited Achilles had a plan, and it was Paris was one of them. They had a plan to fool and deceive Achilles into coming in there thinking he was going to be a part of some kind of a worship religious event, when in fact there was an ambush for him with Trojan warriors surrounding him and going to attack him all at once or destroy him. Yeah, it was a trick and a deception which Paris invented and planned out and constructed to trap Achilles in the temple of Athena and murder him in there. And so Achilles was unaware of any of this. He went into that temple thinking he was just going to do some religious ceremony to help the Trojans out a little bit, because he actually hated the Greeks and also supported them. And so he was trying to be friends with both in a way. And ultimately, because of it, he died, because Paris shot him then in that temple with the arrow into his foot, which was the death blow for Achilles. Now, Helenus intervenes directly. When this happens, Helenus, who's the high priest of Apollo, so he's a very, influential figure in all of Troy. Helenus intervenes directly and orders Paris to cease and desist immediately from dishonoring Achilles' body. And as Paris is trying to feed it to the crows and the vultures and the pigs, Helenus has all the high priests and priests surround the body and protect it, keeping Paris away. So he's rejecting his own brother and calling him a bad man and saying, "How dare you kill Achilles? You just murdered. It's an act of outlaw tragedy and absurd, and how dare you?" So Helenus was calling his own brother a mere criminal now and saying, "You just murdered and deceived a goddess man, the man that should not have been tricked into that deception. He should not have been killed or murdered. How dare you?" So ultimately, Paris has lost the support of Helenus. When he lost the support of his brother Helenus, he lost the support of Athena and Apollo. And unfortunately, Paris, that was a death blow to Paris. And so did all the people that were in on it with Paris, meaning Helenus, the high priest, Helenus himself, said, "My brother just killed Achilles, and he did it by trickery and deception and lying. And he led Achilles to believe that he was coming in there for a religious ceremony and that he was going to actually help them, when they actually murdered him and lied to his face and led him to believe that he was helping them, not being murdered." So Helenus said, "How dare my family be so wrong and so evil and bad," that he literally denounced his own brother and said, "You just committed an act that's not forgivable." And his brother Paris just kind of fled out of the scene, having lost immediately Apollo and Athena's support. Because when Helenus took it away by denying Paris, Paris lost the entities at that point, because they were had through Helenus, the high priest. So Paris didn't have their support solely as an individual. He had their support through Helenus, which he probably didn't even know, which meant that he lost it and didn't know it's possible he didn't know he had it. It's possible that if he did know he had it, it's possible he didn't know it was through Helenus, or that he assumed it was just through his own self. So understand, when you lose the support of a god or goddess, there could be many factors as to why you lose it or how it gets lost. Also many reasons as to how it's had or kept or not lost. So Helenus accuses his brother Paris of murdering Achilles without honor and by deceit and trickery, withdrawing his support from Paris and declaring Achilles' murder as an unlawful act and outrage. It has everything to do with the goddess within Achilles, that Helenus is trying to honor the divine feminine. That Achilles was trying to do the right thing through being like his mother, so it was gotten killed. But Helenus becomes a slave to Achilles' son now, because Achilles' son murdered Priam in the temple of Athena. And so basically Achilles is dead, but now his son comes to fight in his place. And his son comes in, basically gets in during the sacking of Troy. He kills Priam, and because Helenus had protected Achilles and honored him, and even denounced his own family for what they did to Achilles by unfairly trapping him, ultimately the son of Achilles heard about it and said, like, "So you're the enemy, high priest of Apollo, but like, you saved my brother from dishonor or my dad from dishonor, and ultimately you did a great thing for me, so I appreciate it." So basically, Achilles' son was to become the next king and the new Achilles over everything. It's a powerful figure. So because he had done such a good thing, Achilles' son really liked Helenus, said, "Thank you for saving my dad's honor and protecting him and denouncing your own family in truth." And Helenus said, "Well, I did it because it was true, that in fact it wasn't fair." And ultimately he said, "For that, I'm going to make you a slave. And you're going to be my slave now. And I'm going to also reward you. And then you can come with me and I'll give you whatever you want. We'll be friends, but ultimately you're my slave, quote unquote." So Helenus was aware now, "Oh, I get to be your slave? Well, yeah, you're the enemy. We'd have to kill you otherwise, because we're going to kill every man of Troy, including all your brothers and your father." So Helenus was, man, think of the situation he was in when he was like seeing every one of his brothers, 50 of them die, his dad die, and he was going to go be enslaved to his captors, who he told the secrets to how to sack Troy, and he didn't betray Troy. He did not, because ultimately The only way that he betrayed Troy was if when he told the Greeks that they had to gain Athena's support. The only way that he could have betrayed Troy is if Athena herself betrayed Troy. Because if the Greeks had to be gaining Athena's support in order to actually be able to sack Troy, well, Helenus told them that if Athena, the goddess, approves of you, when you go to her and try to take her presence, because Troy doesn't deserve it anymore, if she lets you take it, you'll think you stole it. But the fact that you actually get away with it out of that city will be because she lets you, not because you stole it, because you can't steal it. And ultimately, they were aware now. So you're saying that we can't steal that palladium. It's not possible. No, it's not. But if you go there and take it and leave the city, it's because Athena's with you and she went with you by choice and wanted you to take her. So she was removing herself by her own will. She didn't want nothing to do with Troy anymore. The goddess herself was abandoning her own country and going to the other side. And Odysseus and Diomedes would have thought it had something to do with their prowess or trickery or theft of her, when in fact, they may or may not have known all the details. So ultimately, people would have thought Helenus betrayed his own Troy and his country and his family because he told the Greeks how to sack Troy, basically. But only if Athena agreed to it. And he knew that. If Athena don't agree to it, and she's already protecting Troy, the only thing that could happen now is if the Trojan men and Trojan women of Troy don't deserve to live, then Athena won't agree to that they do either. And then Troy needs to fall. So Helenus was very aware that everything was on Athena and her decision whether they were going to be able to steal it or not. So he told Diomedes that. He told Odysseus that, and they probably could have thought anything, or maybe didn't even understood it all. They probably went in there slick and thinking, I could steal Athena and we'll win. Ultimately, that would have been a huge mistake. And if they'd actually done it like that, Athena would have said, no, I don't think so. You're not even getting anywhere with my palladium. So ultimately, they went in there and they were sincere. That's what I'll tell you. They were sincere. They went in there probably scared, and they're like honoring her and saying, come with us. We're going to steal you. Ultimately, she said, okay, if you're sincere, then I guess you could try to steal me and see if you can get away with it. Helenus does all he is told by the mysterious god. The gods and goddesses all but utterly destroy each other. Only one god is left to survive as the only one god remaining of what was many, many gods and goddesses, now all destroyed, likely by the surviving of the god himself. So there's an eventual ending here where there's one god and only one god left. And there's no mention of all the destruction of all the goddesses or all of the gods that used to be before only one was left. So suddenly we're in a one God world with only one God, and that's all we're told. But ultimately the truth here is there was a mass killing and a mass war and a mass conflict where thousands perhaps of goddesses and gods were murdered all at once. And they all died except one single god who survived. It was a singular standing god that was the victor. Only he himself was the singular standing man. It was probably Zeus. Helenus does finally die and spawns a French Moravian kingdom of a royal line of kings through the fact that Helenus is reborn and must meet the two requirements to receive his gift of prophecy in his next life. So Helenus, for doing all these honorable things in the Trojan War and or being a traitor to Troy, depending on how you want to look at it, whether you're trying to accuse him of being a traitor of Troy and betraying his family and his country, or telling him he's going to become a king of many lands because the gods love him, and he's the greatest high priest ever to Apollo, who's now dead. But the goddesses live on in the feminine collective through Athena, which means that the goddesses don't all die because Athena lives through the war. And ultimately, it's just Zeus living, and he lives too. And so ultimately, if Athena survives the war, it's because she's only one god with her father. There would be no difference between one god and the one god. It would be the daughter one god, who's her father, and the father one god, who is the father of that daughter. So Helenus meets the requirements, but is not given the gift of prophecy as in the form of intellectual property. So after Helenus dies eventually, and he was the king of many lands, and he ended up with Hector as his wife. Well, that was the great scenario. The mysterious god had told him, if you do everything right, you'll be a slave for a few years. I'll give you everything you want, though, and you'll be ultimately rewarded. And in the end, when the son of Achilles dies as well, and he will, then you will end up being the king. And with Hector, you'll spawn the new Troy that will become a Moravian line of kings to form the new world. So Troy won't totally die off through you. Will be the one who actually survives Troy, and Troy lives on through you. kind of like an anus thing, like that's our story. Hellenus is born again and meets the requirements again. So Hellenus is meeting two requirements to be able to get his gift of prophecy in every lifetime. He's supposed to get this gift, which was given to him by Apollo, in every lifetime. And Apollo had a deal struck with the gods and goddesses, all of them, including any one of them that survived, including the one that did. So that God was supposed to honor his high priest by the fact that if Apollo had died in the war, and I'm going to tell you he did. So the Apollo god died in the Trojan conflict. He didn't survive it. And ultimately, if in some symbolical sense, his presence was just removed utterly, so he had to go run off in a corner and maybe he did survive it, it's the same thing. Because if his presence is utterly removed from the conflict, it's gone, whether he's somewhere else and still there or not. Apollo wanted to guarantee his high priest would not be left in any lifetime without his gift of prophecy for his own protection, because Hellenus was such a loyal servant of God and such a absolute loyal to the T and dedication was no end, which meant that he would be a willing slave and be okay with it. So it was ultimately, he was a high priest man who would be a slave and perfectly okay with it. And accept that he's never going to have any charge or authority, but he'll just be a slave that's maybe loved and treated right. He was willing to do it 100% without thinking twice, forever. So the problem is that 38 lifetimes passed. Hellenus was died. He was reborn. He forgot who he ever was. So now during the next 37 lifetimes after he was Hellenus, he forgot who he was. So he was born in the next one. He didn't even know who Hellenus was, or that he even ever existed before. He didn't know he had a gift of prophecy, or that he was even supposed to get it each lifetime. He was only aware of a feeling of total disappointment for 37 lifetimes as he met the requirements, which were coupling, genuine coupling. So he was required to couple in a spiritual sense with the divine feminine collective or the goddess. And it had to be a real, genuine connection. It couldn't be made up or falsified or faked or false in any describable, foreseeable way, or he would be not meeting the two requirements. The second requirement was sharing information with the divine feminine, where she was blind and no longer told anything by the god, meaning as a high priest, he had a responsibility to tell her whatever she needs to know so she could correct herself. And that includes a lot of things that maybe he didn't want to tell her, or that if she knew, she would only become more difficult and rebellious. So ultimately, it would behoove the high priest not to share his information with difficult women that would only be more rebellious. Given the information, they would try to use it against the men. So ultimately, it wasn't good to go tell a woman anything, but it was more agreeable not to tell her anything at all. And many high priests would not tell women a lot of things they needed to know. In fact, that if they didn't know, they certainly couldn't correct themselves and wouldn't. So ultimately, those high priests were blamed for not telling these women what they needed to know when the information that they didn't tell them was scrutinized, and the high priests were ultimately scrutinized and then attacked and ultimately removed from their authority, saying you didn't do your high priest job. But Hellenus did his high priest job, and his second requirement was to tell her what she needs to know, even if it's not conducive to his own personal reality. It might cost him a lot, but tell her anyways, because if you don't tell her and she needs to know, how is she going to know then? And ultimately, then he would say, okay, so I'll tell her even if it hurts me, or I don't want to do it, or it's even detrimental to, if I do it, I might be injured in many ways, like exposing myself or making enemies with women that now know who they're against me and want to be. So ultimately, he told him everything, but he told him stuff they didn't even need to know, just because he was afraid that they should know it, so he could help them as best he could. He was so in cooperation with the goddess and the divine feminine collective that he literally was with her, for her, and as her, and loved her and accepted her 100%. He was trying to help her. He truly didn't want her to lose the conflict in Troy. He didn't want the women to lose. He didn't want the goddesses to lose. He wanted the goddesses to win, but he also wanted the gods to win. He didn't want to lose himself as a god man. So he was basically trying to bring the two collectives together in some resolution. And when the 7th year of the Trojan conflict came around and it was suddenly realized that it wasn't going to happen, well, he was in big disappointment, and it would span 37 lifetimes that he would not get his gift of prophecy, and he would not receive it. It was because the goddesses had made an agreement with Apollo, the sun god, before he died or was killed by Achilles. They had made an agreement saying that if we're going to agree that if something happens to you, Apollo, so Apollo's saying, yeah, if I'm a god, but if I die, who's going to watch my priest for me in all lifetimes to come? I want him to be taken care of for all lifetimes to come. So ultimately the goddess said, well, if we're willing to do that, if suppose you do die, Apollo, well, if you're not here then at the end of the conflict and we are, well, we'll only agree to actually take up a motherly role and help him if he has to give us his gift of prophecy until he's 18 years old, and we keep it and we could do whatever we want with it. And until he's 18, we don't have to give it to him at all. In fact, even tell him about it. But when he's 18, we'll agree to give it to him only if he meets the 2 requirements. And we don't even have to tell him about the 2 requirements. And Apollo agreed to that because he said, well, I already know he's going to meet the requirements for every lifetime to come because I know him well. He's not going to go backwards or transgress in reverse. And ultimately, it turned out Apollo was wrong because he did transgress in reverse big time after 37 lifetimes of being denied his gift and not even knowing he had it coming, but ultimately feeling utter frustration that no life was okay and everything was catastrophically a disaster because he had no idea who he even was, ever was, or would ever be. Or, yeah, he was a blank man born in a new body and said, something's so wrong. I could feel like something's wrong. What is it? And he just never would have an understanding. It would lead him to set himself against the divine feminine and also hate her in a way that wasn't even right for his advantage because he didn't hate her. He loved her. The thing was, is he was so twisted and bent by not getting his gift over and over. And the reason why she wouldn't give it to him is because she did not want him to think he could be a god, being powerful with his ego. She said she basically rationalized. So remember the mysterious God I'm telling you about? The mysterious God that no one knows his identity, that showed up in the 7th year, that didn't exist before that? Well, he would be the one to reveal all these details. That, in fact, the gods and goddesses were not even aware of this mysterious God that Hellenus was in contact with since the 7th year, when Hellenus was told it was never going to be resolved, but you'll either live or die and survive or not. And so Hellenus meets the requirements, but is not given the gift of prophecy as the form of intellectual property. Hellenus is born again and meets the requirements again. The divine feminine plan is to thwart Hellenus in his success. Divine feminine collective sabotages and attacks Hellenus to get him to fail to meet the requirements by his reaction emotionally to being unfairly attacked, which he also will drink alcohol with and get grudgeful and revengeful with and want revenge and vengeance because he doesn't know how unfair it is. I can't believe what you're doing. Like ultimately the goddesses just wanted to attack him and screw with him so he would become a character which was now disqualified for being an idiot. Yeah, you're so mad at us by now. You don't meet the requirements for your gift, son. We didn't even tell you about it, but we get to keep it now because we're not giving it to you, boy. And ultimately, he felt that for 37 lifetimes. The mothers wouldn't give it to him when he was 18, and he went through 37 times in a row where he was an 18-year-old kid waiting for his gift, meeting the requirements, doing what was right, being a loyal servant to God and even the goddesses, 100%. But those witchy bitches actually would rather keep his gift, steal it from him, call it their own, and actually demand it wasn't even his, not even his right, and even make him feel guilty about his own right to have it, but make him feel guilty that it wasn't his right to have it. In fact, by the fact that he was even wanting the right to have it, he was wrong and should be ashamed of himself. And they ultimately succeeded in making him feel utterly guilty and hate himself over the fact that it was his and not theirs, and he deserved it, and they didn't. They were supposed to honor something that they did not honor to the degree, which was at some point, the mysterious God returns. Hellenus does not remember him or have any memories of his prior lifetimes. Lifetime after lifetime, Hellenus meets the requirements, but his gift is either stolen from him by the mothers, or he doesn't even know he's got a gift coming. So he is drinking and doesn't meet the requirements because he says, women are wrong. They are witches and let's kill them all. Or even if I don't really mean that, I think I'm saying that anyways, because I like them, but I hate them too. So ultimately, Hellenus was, just because of that attitude, it was enough to get his gift of prophecy denied to him. And utterly, he would never even know what he was doing, was just having an attitude and being angry at the divine feminine. It was enough to fail. And it was his fault. And they would tell him that, it's your fault, buddy. But you're the one that hates us. And we didn't do anything except just attack you when you weren't looking and say, you're emotionally reacting. You don't even know why. Yeah, they would ultimately do that to him. And he would just say, that's so unfair. I don't even know what's happening. It was the worst kind of anger, that he was also not angry. So he was a loving priest that was twisted and angry and then not angry. And then it was every kind of torture and suffering that he had to endure. The mysterious God tries to speak with Hellenus. But Divine Feminine Collective has decided and declared the unknown God to be a twisted and evil, bad entity. It is rejected and Hellenist is told to reject whatever. Hellenist goes to the Divine Feminine Collective in the goddess head and tells them at some point there's an unknown God all this time, because he's with the goddesses. He's totally in cooperation with them, has no idea they're his enemy, or even that they're withholding his birthright and gift, and don't even care if he dies or kills himself again and again. Ultimately, they have no compassion or feelings for him or his demise or his. They're like evil witches that deserve to be burned at the stake, literally. And that's what God would say. They're that bad or worse. And so they're also pretending to be his loving mothers. They're saying, it's okay, Hellenist, I got your gift, but you don't even know it. And I'm not telling you, but but you're mad about that. Why are you being so mad at me? Ultimately, Hellenist was just destroyed. There was no coming out of it. He was utterly trying to be a sincere, victimized high priest that was considered already the most loyal priest ever known to serve a god. And Apollo had declared that he was special among men in the sense that he was more loyal than any of the men ever combined at all, period. It was a special case. And ultimately, he not only was denied the honor that Apollo wanted to give him, but Apollo wanted to give him that honor so bad. Apollo went out of his way to make it so all the gods and goddesses agreed that all his lifetimes he would get the gift. And it turned out that none of them he got the gift. For 3,000 years, he was denied his gift. It was as a result of the Divine Feminine Collective wanting to steal it, and the mothers always not giving it to their sons. Understand that every 18-year-old birthday he had for 3,000 years, his mothers decided, well, my son ain't getting it, and I don't even need to tell him. It's ultimately, look how mad he is at me. He doesn't meet the requirements. He doesn't deserve his gift. It's mine. Ultimately, that was why he hated his mother and would want to kill her. He'd also want to kill himself. Maybe he'd kill himself, but not her. But ultimately, that was part of his problem. He couldn't even hate right because he didn't hate. He was just being victimized by a bunch of bad women that were the worst. So in the year 1968, Hellenist is finally accepted and approved by the unknown God. So it's 3,000 years into this. 3,000 years are into this. Hellenist is not getting his gift, a prophecy that Apollo promised him he'd get in every lifetime, and he went out of his way to guarantee it. Don't worry, Hellenist. Every lifetime you'll be blessed. You'll always have a good life because I already know this is a gift to your soul, not to your body. I want you to have this gift forever. So, because you're that great, Hellenist. So yeah, Hellenist was like, cool, and ultimately he spent 3,000 years not even getting it once. He didn't receive it ever at any time. And it was the women, the goddesses, were stealing it, justifying that they could steal his gift because they can't be goddesses or they lost the Trojan conflict. And now there's only one God. They certainly justified everything as to why they weren't going to ever give it to him, determined to let him destroy himself, and who cares? So he does not establish any intent or even a single communication with this unknown God. Still, he knows and remembers nothing, which means that this unknown God that's talking to Hellenist after he's been reborn a few times, well, Hellenist forgot who he was. So Hellenist only knew who this unknown God was and knew that he was a god and was unknown during the time of the conflict when he was the high priest of Troy and Apollo. But when he died and then became in the next lifetime after he was Hellenist, when he was a new man and now born among the Moravian line of kings, now he was born and forgot who he used to be. And in fact, assumed he never used to be anything, but also wondered who he might have been. And ultimately, the unknown God would come to him as a new man that had forgotten and try to talk to Hellenist. So ultimately, the insurance policy for Hellenist to be okay was that whoever the unknown God was that he used to know actually who he was. Well, he didn't know who he was, but he knew that he was unknown. He was a god. He knew that much, and he knew it was a real God, whatever it was. He also knew that the God was providing with information. So understand, when Hellenist was reborn, he not only forgot who that God was, he forgot the entire Trojan conflict or that he was ever Hellenist. So that when that God came to him, he certainly didn't know who that God was, but he didn't remember him and certainly had no familiarity of any idea of whatever he was. All he knew was that whatever that is I don't even know if it's a God, but it's freaking me out. So the unknown God came to Hellenist and tried to tell him and communicate with him. But Hellenist was directed and in cooperation with the Divine Feminine. And the Divine Feminine was telling him that God, whoever you're in contact with, because he told him, there's a God coming to me and telling me some good news. Ultimately, I have a birthright or something, or some gift prophecy that I'm supposed to receive from my mother, or ultimately like that. And ultimately, they're saying, no, it's not true. And that God is an evil God of bad entity. Don't have anything to do with it. Just reject it and don't talk to it. Don't have any communications or you'll die. Ultimately, whatever they told him was something like that. And ultimately he was like, wait a minute, but I'm supposedly getting some, they said that I get some. No, it's all a lie. So he believed that he thought the divine feminine was with him. He was with the divine feminine 100%, but the divine feminine was only pretending to steal his gift and keep it from him. And they knew what they were doing. They were that bad. Since Hellenist knows absolutely nothing about any of this, he has set himself against the divine feminine collective forever. After 38 lifetimes, he declares to himself, women are evil witches from hell and should all burn at the stake. And the crucial sad thing is, he doesn't mean any of it. He's more twisted and so upset and hurt and utterly just PTSD'd and trampled upon emotionally and spiritually, because he can't even hate women, not even when they were that bad to him. He still can't find himself to hate them and actually hate them. He still loves them and just hates himself for the fact he can't hate them enough to protect himself. You see, he not only failed at he didn't fail at loving them. He certainly succeeded at loving them. He was 100% cooperative and absolutely tried everything in his power to love them and do whatever they wanted, and ultimately expected them to also be for him. He didn't know they were pretending to be for him. He had every disturbing possibility happen to him during all his lifetimes. For 3,000 years, Hellenist was a tortured soul by the divine feminine collective, who were angry goddesses wanting to refuse him his birthright or his gift of prophecy, because how dare the god Apollo, that egotistical god that we killed off. Well, we can't be goddesses, but at least Apollo's dead, and we're not going to honor his stupid priest who's an idiot ego and should die anyways with the Trojans. So yeah, he's lucky he even got to survive. Ultimately, yeah, that's the whole story of how bad it got. So since Hellenist is totally unaware in every lifetime, it's not fair. So this unknown god declares Hellenist must meet the two requirements and becomes aware Hellenist is not able to overcome the PTSD or the emotional trauma involved. He's just defeated. He's crushed. His spirit is crushed. Hellenist is so angry at the divine feminine and just so bitter and mad at himself for not being able to even be against him when he's against him, and he's against himself and hates himself more than anything more. And ultimately, he's not even capable of hating them. It's so pathetic. It's sick, and he's that twisted and suffering 10 times worse for it. He can't even be an effective resistance against her, because he's not even able to be against her. He's just a victim of her, and utterly she's victimizing him, and he's now hating himself. So as required, this unknown god is aware of all this and watching this lifetime after lifetime. He's watching the divine feminine abuse Hellenist, and he also didn't necessarily want to do anything for Hellenist other than if Hellenist meets the requirements, he could have his gift. But ultimately, in every lifetime, the unknown god was watching these divine feminine mothers in the collective destroy his ability by sabotaging it intentionally. And he became angry after about like 40 or 50 lifetimes. The unknown god was still around, and he said, enough is enough. You have utterly he's not going to ever meet the requirements because of what you've done to him, and it's your fault, not his. He's a victim of the divine feminine collective. There was a judgment made. If Hellenist submits to her in the next life, the failure for over 3,000 years to be able to do so is only a possible fact, and he will need to be tortured bad enough in 1968 and die in that torture session, so that in the next life he will not dare cross her, would rather die and be tortured than cross her and die and be tortured. So basically, the unknown god has a plan. He forces Hellenist by death and torture to succumb to death and torture by being captured as a soldier, and to be eligible in his next life for meeting the two requirements now, because the way that the god who can't talk to Hellenist and tell him anything, Hellenist has forgotten everything. Hellenist doesn't know there's a gift he's supposed to get. He doesn't know that for 3,000 years he hasn't got it. He's destroyed emotionally. The fact that it's been so unfair. He's literally not able to be even reasonable. He's flipped out of his mind permanently forever. So the unknown god says there's only one way we're going to fix him. Well, if he's not going to be able to handle it and get control of himself and calm down, he's not going to meet the requirements. He's not going to be able to have his gift, because he's got to be responsible with such a great gift. He can't be an angry, mad child with it, or an evil, bad, unless we declare he can be. So the unknown god declares one day, and first he judges the divine feminine collective, says she is the reason that he can't possibly make it forever. And so it's her fault that he doesn't meet the two requirements. So the unknown god declared that there's a judgment against the divine feminine collective, and it's a death sentence for her, that she might as well be dead, because the unknown god was declaring her the enemy, and now was going to attack her actively in every way to torture her, harass her, make her enslaved, punish her in any way he could, have joy about it, because the unknown God actually got to that intensity after 3,000 years, saying this is just not right, but they're so bad and so wrong that now I'm going to torture those women and burn them at the stake and actually enjoy it. And ultimately it got that bad that even the unknown God, was actually hating those women that bad that he was actually having them burned to the stake and called witches and charged with witchcraft. And it was the God that had the men do it and then burn them at the stake for it, because he wanted those women to die and suffer bad and be tortured because of what they did to Hellenes. And Hellenes was beyond recovery. He could not be helped because he was so emotionally distraught and destroyed. There was no helping him. And so how did he get helped? The unknown God, had him tortured, captured first as a soldier in battle, and then had him tortured to death slowly and in the most unimaginable ways. The God told Hellenes before he killed him, you can never go against the divine feminine collective, son. If you ever think you could do it in any lifetime to come, or that you've done it over and over, you've gone against her in the past, God said that he went to Hellenes as his torturer and tortured him so freaking badly in the worst unimaginable ways that he told Hellenes before he killed him that if you reject her in the next lifetime, you're going to lose your gift of prophecy. And then he was like, what gift of prophecy? What are you talking about? I'm held captive. I'm a soldier. He said, if in the next lifetime you are able to reject her, you cannot meet the requirements, and I have to deny you your gift of prophecy. You've already been being denied it for 3,000 years, son. Now you're being tortured to death, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to torture you so bad and so intensely that you will never cross her, no matter what, guaranteed, because I will make you tortured so badly that you wouldn't dare do it. And now I'm about to carry it out. And ultimately, he's a kid, 19 years old, and this unknown God said, I'm doing this to help him. Do you understand that if he doesn't meet the requirements, I can't give him his gift? And it's the only thing he wants and the only thing he hasn't had for 3,000 years. He has to not reject her at any cost. He must not do it, and he won't be told anything. They're going to withhold all the information, and I'm not even allowed to tell him, which means that he has to be tortured to the point of his emotional reaction against her can't happen. And so God himself tortured that kid slowly into death, so that kid was so afraid of crossing her that it swore in its soul, I will never cross mommy again under any circumstances, especially because I don't want to get tortured this bad again. And ultimately, that because he got tortured as bad as he did, his shift went from I hate her and I can't stand her. It went from that to completely just like a boy that was like, oh, I can't ever cross mom. I'm not a tough guy anymore. I'm a destroyed little boy. And so Hellenes was reduced to a destroyed little boy by the unknown God, because the unknown God was trying to help him and save him by telling him, I'm going to give you your gift next lifetime and you may die now. But understand, I'll kill you and make it so you can hurry up and be born, and I'm going to reward you next lifetime. And I'm going to actually let you have your gift of prophecy, and I'm going to come to you and tell you all about this. So you're going to be aware of all of it. And so you won't be suffering anymore, son. This will be the last time you'll ever suffer. And this will be the worst too, because understand, when you come back next time, you'll be so emotionally destroyed, you won't dare think to go against her no matter what. And that's exactly what I want, because I'm going to give you your gift of prophecy if you're actually meeting those requirements, and no one, including me, is going to tell you anything. So you have to somehow do it. And he came back as the last life after 1968. He came back as Hellenes, whoever the new man was, and he didn't remember any of this. But he was a man that was emotionally not able to cross her or go against her. He said, no, I would never go against the divine feminine. Why? I don't know. I would never do it. I'd rather be tortured to death. It already happened. Well, truly, that was what it truly was. So the unknown God has succeeded in saving his soul. Isn't that crazy that he saved the kid's soul by guaranteeing him his gift? But first, he'd have to torture him in the worst freaking imaginable way so he wouldn't dare cross his mother, because that was her excuse to deny him his gift again for another lifetime, over and over forever. So ultimately, he could not do it unless that God actually helped him. And think about that. Think about the relationship between Hellenes. When he realizes this, he's told by this unknown God, what did you do for me? I tortured you in the worst ways. And ultimately, I didn't like it, but ultimately I had to make sure it was really good. And you couldn't possibly be coming into your next life and 18 years old, and this is going to happen to you again. I won't allow it. So then what are you going to do? I'm going to torture you so bad, you're going to freaking be on her side, even if she's that much of a witch and deserving to die or be burned at the stake. You certainly won't dare challenge her ever again, boy, after I get through with you. And it happened. It succeeded. And this God, who is the murderer of Hellenus, and in the worst ways. He'd never died so bad. He'd never been tortured so utterly, so badly. Understand that the unknown God tortured him to help him, not to give him a chance to receive his gift for the first time. And he did the next lifetime. He received it because the unknown God, was able to give it to him because he met the two requirements. He coupled honestly with the divine feminine and accepted her, even though she attacked him relentlessly up until his 18th birthday and saying, like, Ed tried everything. So he would be mad at her and then go into disposition and disqualify himself. Well, he was just so damn tortured to death from it that he was not going to do it. He said, fine, you can win. You can have my gift. I don't care. I don't even want my gift. I don't even know I've got it coming. And that saved him and guaranteed him his gift's coming. So when the unknown God came back to him in his last life, he said, you don't even know me, but can you hear me? And he said, yeah. He said, do you know who you are or who you were or who you've been or what you've been trying to do? Or, well, no. Who are you? Well, I'm an unknown God that used to talk to you many times and used to know who I am. But understand now you forgot because you've been born over and over and forgetting, and I've not been able to talk to you. And ultimately, this last lifetime, this unknown God went to him and made sure that he didn't cross the divine feminine. And so because he was even-minded and tempered, and he accepted the divine feminine, even when they were cruel and the worst witches, and they were the worst witches deserving burning at the stakes, they were only trying to make him screw up. And he was so not going to do it this time. I ain't going to be tortured by God himself again like that. I won't cross her. Oh, good, because ultimately, and now every lifetime coming, you're going to get your gift, and I'm going to now take away. So this unknown God declared her as the problem and said that she will pay for eternity. She's never going to be a goddess. She's never going to be anything powerful. She's going to be punished by me, and I'm going to be evil and bad and wrong to her, and I have no cares or compassion for her. She's nothing but a witch bitch and should die, if you ask me. This is opinion. Yeah, we're talking about this is the truth. I'm not trying to be against her. What I'm saying is she was that bad against her son over and over again. It was just a goddess mad at the God for being only one. And how come there's not only one goddess? She would think, well, there should be only one goddess, and God should be just destroyed or dead or disempowered. Well, ultimately, the truth is, God's the one. There's only one God, and he's not disempowered. He's ruling everything. This is a man's world. This is a God's world. It's a fact. But this is not a woman's world. It certainly is not. It's not a goddess's world. And understand, even I had to come to that idea that it's true. I was disappointed to understand how true it was, because I was trying to help her become a godhead so she could give me my gift, when in fact she was pissed that she couldn't be a godhead and was already denying it to me. Do you see? It's the kind of spirit in Hellenus that would be feeling so utterly denied by his mother, and she would show him every kind of love to his face, which made him even more emotionally bent. He couldn't understand anything about what his feelings were doing, but they were nothing good and always twisted. Because Hellenus is tortured so badly and killed, for 3,000 years, all Hellenus wants is to have his gift. For 3,000 years, Hellenus somehow is tricked or deceived out of his gift, and judgment has been made against the divine feminine collective by the unknown God, who is considered as an evil bad God by her. And she convinces everybody, including Hellenus, that whatever that unknown God is, he's an evil, bad, wrong, terrible God. He's evil to the core. Don't listen to him. He'll just try to kill you. Ultimately, that was all a lie, because that unknown God didn't ever say who he was, but he said that I'm not evil. I'm going to be the most evil you can bet, though, especially to her. So don't think I'm not. I am very evil. Hellenus just wants his gift. He knows nothing, though, about any of this. The unknown God helps Hellenus meet the two requirements in his next life. Hellenus refuses to go against the divine feminine and her at any price at all odds. Hellenus is now eligible to receive his gift of prophecy in his first life after 3,000 years of being, in every lifetime, individually targeted by her and her collective and ultimately destroyed on purpose, which meant that she killed him over 3,000 times, or how of that 3,000 years, she murdered his son by destroying him intentionally any way she could, including had him kill himself or just give up on life. She intentionally destroyed him. It was a mother killing off her need to give her son a birthright, which she was holding on until he was 18. She was supposed to give it to him. 2022, Hellenus has first communication with unknown God. So that's the year 2022 now. we're talking about 3,000 years ago was the conflict in Troy, where Hellenus was actually a man who knew who he was. He forgot who he was utterly and didn't ever recapture it for 3,000 years. And in 2022, Hellenus has a first communication with the unknown God and has already forgotten him. No matter how many times he ever knew him or knew he was, he forgot him utterly again and again each time. So is told everything. And thanks to the unknown God, he is guaranteed to receive his gift in every lifetime from now on, as God declares after 2022, his right to receive the gift in every lifetime is as a given and an automatic, meaning he does not further need to meet the two requirements ever again for first, and will receive his gift forever after the time, as no requirements necessary whatsoever, because the God declares the divine feminine and her so wrong and bad and evil and undeserving that the God literally reverses the two requirements and says he does not need to ever meet them again. But furthermore, the God makes an utterly shocking declaration that really goes even further in truth. He says if Hellenus becomes evil by his nature and becomes utterly a destroyer of men and women, and even if the world has to end at his twisted desire to kill that witch who's done him so much unrightful harm, meaning I will allow him to be evil and give him a gift that makes him so powerful that he can murder and destroy women at will, and I'll let him do it all. I'll let him kill them all, torture them all, and he might be twisted enough when he forgets his next life and does it. I'll give him his prophecy and tell him, go ahead and just torture women for fun. And ultimately, the God was not even kidding. He said that that woman will never take his gift away again, and no matter how twisted he becomes, he will receive it. And whatever he does, I forgive him already. From now on, for the rest of eternity, he cannot commit a crime as far as I'm concerned, because I already know him, and Apollo, the sun god, already knew him 3,000 years ago and wanted this. So ultimately, the unknown God took so long to respond and come to his rescue. He didn't come to his rescue for the longest time. The unknown God played the neutral, said, well, the boy just can't get it right. But ultimately, he realized even long ago, the boy was trying to get it right. It was the mother that was making it impossible for the boy to get it right. 2022 and on, Hellenus does actually meet the two requirements. So after 2022, Hellenus does meet the requirements for that gift of prophecy that was given to him by the Apollo, the god himself, as the most favored high priest of the gods, that was so loyal and so dedicated, and everything that he did was ultimately everything that was just the greatest. So Hellenus was all that could possibly be seen as great, or a model for anything that was considered anything special or valuable. Because if it was that Hellenus could do it, he did it the best of any man or any ego, and he was sincere and loving and caring to all the women and every one of them, not excluding any of them, and even all the men, and certainly loyal and willing to even be a slave. So the gods declared him to be a servant that unsurpassed and went beyond the call of duty so far that they were shocked themselves. That high priest needs protection forever now. In the next lifetime, we can afford that he's going to be victimized again by anyone, especially her. Because he's not going to be wrong next lifetime. He's not going to ever be wrong 10 lifetimes from now. He's always been right. And truly, he's gone warped and twisted. But the thing is he was never wrong, even when he was warped and twisted, because he certainly is incapable of hating her. He loves her too much. He's going to destroy himself before he actually allows himself to hate her and becomes evil. But the God declared that if he does become evil and he actually turns into the devil or Satan himself, perfectly, it's okay. It's perfectly fine. And in fact, not only will he get away with it, but it'll be a promoted belief that, good boy, son, you mean you're kicking that witch's ass and throwing her over the edge instead of, yeah, I guess the tables are turned now. So ultimately, the unknown God was not only willing to support him, but declared him absolutely incapable of being a criminal in any way, as far as being proper or not. But he was allowed to be improper. He was given full permission to be an evil son of the SOB, and even commit every crime. In fact, he couldn't be whatever he did against women. Well, ultimately, if they won't give him his birthright again and they try to do it again, well, yeah. What I'm saying is, yeah, it made him righteous in such an intense place. And ultimately, he's mad, but he loves her. So ultimately, what he is realizing is he can't even be evil. He's not even capable of being evil. But if he is, he's only capable of acting evil one or two times, because he's not evil. but maybe one or two times he might do it just to destroy a woman, to kill her ass. He would do it. So ultimately, he wouldn't be evil and continue to be evil. He would just kill a witch if she deserved to die, and then say, well, I had to get rid of her. She was going to definitely keep me from ever being okay. And I was trying to love her and be good to her and wasn't lying. And ultimately, she was pretending to be nice to me and was all nothing but lies. So this convicted the Divine Feminine Collective in a huge way, in the hugest way. And the unknown God himself saw all of this and witnessed 3,000 years of this behavior. And after making the judgment against the Divine Feminine Collective, it ultimately was a result of another 7-year attempt to bring it back together. So Helen has tried for 7 years to bring the Divine Feminine Collective together. Again, 3,000 years later, he tried it once in the conflict in Troy for the first 7 years of the Trojan War. Helenus was busy trying to get the Divine Feminine and Masculine to get along together. And he didn't try it again after Troy, after he failed miserably. Well, he didn't try it again for 3,000 years. And in his last lifetime, the unknown God had him try it one more time and made him an astrologer, tarot card reader, dude that was doing readings for women and talking to the goddesses and being a divine collective, trying to get them together. And ultimately, the unknown God put him in a position where he had another 7 years to try to fix it again. When utterly 3,000 years ago, it went to all hell and hasn't been hell ever since. And he attempted to do it again. And guess what? That unknown God came to him after that 7 years again. And he hadn't even known about that unknown God until the 7th year he had been trying it as a tarot card reader, as an astrologer, as a man talking to goddesses on the internet. He was trying to get the Divine Feminine Collective to be in cooperation with Divine Masculine and mutually doing it in all truth and honesty with love and respect and utter devotion, and was without error. And so ultimately, after 7 years, the unknown God came to him and said, I want you to know something. 3,000 years ago, you tried this and failed utterly. After 7 years, I had to come tell you about what you're doing and what you're trying to do. And you didn't even know then or now, but you're trying to do it again. What? Well, the God came to him and said, you are trying to make the Divine Feminine see their error. You're trying to tell her she needs to look at her errors and her evil ways, but you're doing it nicely. And so you're doing it like a pathetic idiot that will never get it done. And she's not going to give in to you or agree to ever relent to anything you say. You're wasting your time. She is utterly refusing to cooperate and thinks you are an idiot for even trying it. She watched you try it for 7 years and laughed at you the whole time, saying that idiot thinks he could be a goddess man or represent the Divine Feminine. He's an idiot. He's a stupid man, ego that is worth nothing and should die. That's what the unknown God was telling the man. He's trying to say, did you know you last time 3,000 years ago when you did this or that in honor of Apollo? So you did this and that honor of Apollo. Do you know that you tried it again in this lifetime, and it's been 3,000 years since you tried it? You spent 7 years doing it. And I was like, wow. Or whoever he was like, wow, are you kidding me? So what have I been doing for the last 7 years? Failing. You've been failing at a YouTube channel. You've been failing at a card reading, doing anything. You've been failing talking to the goddesses on the internet. You've been failing on YouTube. You've been failing on Facebook. You've been failing in every way, all the time, everywhere, because she says you can't possibly succeed. Not if she's ever going to win. And if I win, she's utterly destroyed, which means that she says that man cannot win and he better be a loser dying or else I'm not okay. She says, I want to have joy when he's dying and I feel good if he's suffering, but make him suffer so I can feel joy and good because I have a right to have a joy. And she doesn't even know what she's done. The God watches her doing that. And the God is aware that she has joy over his pain, but she requires him to be suffering constantly so she can have a right to her joy over his pain. And she may not even know what she's truly doing. And isn't it twisted sick that a woman would actually feel a joy over someone's constant pain and actually require them to be attacked and suffered? Yeah, he deserves, attack that man. I want to see his pain come out and shine like I want you to cut his fingers off slowly so I could feel good about the fact that he's not winning and he'll never win. And ultimately she'll go around going, hi, and what are you so joyful about? Oh, I don't know. It feels pretty good though. At least I can't be a goddess anymore, but at least I could win. And yeah, he's suffering. He's never going to succeed. I guarantee it. Ultimately, I felt pretty bad about that because I was trying everything. Understand, like I was trying everything in sincerity. I was trying everything with the most sincere heart, with the most absolute determined heart and head, with even seeking the guidance of the goddess and the god, both sincerely, utterly, 100%, thinking, how in the hell am I losing still? Why isn't she listening to me? Why isn't she getting what I'm saying? Doesn't she know what she's doing? Can't she see what she's doing? And ultimately, the unknown God comes and says, I want you to know that you can't see what you're doing. Huh? You can't even see what you're doing, the unknown God says to him. What am I doing? You're trying to be a man named Helenus, trying to save the world and trying to make the Divine Feminine Collective see her witchy ways and admit her guilt. And she'll never do it, but she thinks you're wrong to dare accuse her. In fact, she says you should die for trying it. And you've already tried so many times. She says that a death sentence is only good for you. And she says, unless you die, it's not even fair to her that she should have to suffer because you live. And she suffers because you live. Understand, that's what he was being told by the unknown God. Are you kidding me? I thought she loved me. She hates you and pretends to love you, but she can't stand you. And she thinks that she loathes you. And then she's actually a friend to your face. And she's nothing but full of lies and pretending it for whatever gain, either to deceive and fool you and lead you to believe anything she wants or to control you in any emotional manner. But she's utterly aware of what she's doing. And she's not concerned if you suffer or die, but even okay with everything you're suffering through. She's certainly okay that you die, and plus you suffer. And that she could, I don't believe it. Don't tell me she says you're an evil, bad God entity. Oh, I know. And I've watched her destroy you and murder you lifetime after lifetime on your 18th birthday. And she's telling you what? She says you're an evil, bad God full of all hell and rule hell probably, and don't listen to you because it would be like following Satan or the devil himself. Like, you're a bad entity. No one should talk to you or listen to you or give you the time of day. In fact, we should utterly reject you. So the unknown God is saying, yeah, and I'm really mad about that because I already knew that. But I want you to have said that out loud so you could hear what you just said. What? She's accusing you of being a bad God that's a bad entity that's actually like evil. Yes, and I'm actually not a bad God. I'm actually the only one God, and I'm not evil. But now I'm becoming evil every minute and liking it myself. And I do like it myself. And I'm blaming her for the fact I have joy now that she suffers because she has joy that you suffer. So I'm now torturing her for torturing you. And I'm enjoying her suffering because she's enjoying your suffering. And you're not enjoying anything except getting attacked and suffering. Okay, great. So man, I'm really a victim here. You're not only a victim, you're the victim. And not just of the century, but three centuries at least, or 300 centuries. So you're trying to say that I didn't do anything wrong. I'm trying to say you never did anything wrong. You always tried to do everything right. In fact, you did everything right all along, and that's why you got victimized. And everything wrong happened to you. Because you weren't willing to do anything wrong, not even once. You mean I was that good and that loving and that right and that true? Well, yeah, that's why you suffered 3,000 years in hell, because you were that good and that right and that sincere. And if you had only just been that bad and that willing to be that bad and that wrong, then you wouldn't have lost and suffered so bad and in such an intense way that you did. So your failure to become evil and wrong on purpose was your ultimate demise, son. Yeah, but am I going to be blamed for that? Like, this man just couldn't become bad, so he just had to suffer instead and become a victim. Well, that's what you've done for 3,000 years. And not only did you insist upon it, but you literally made us all upset. In fact, the whole world went to hell because of you. And we fought wars over you. It's not your fault. In fact, it's our fault. We should kill ourselves, not you. But we're still busy trying to blame you for it. And you're blaming yourself for it. So you're not even blaming us. You're actually blaming yourself. So you're coming to tell me all this? Yes. So you actually aren't going to be a victim this time because I'm not going to allow it. Okay, great. So you're telling me I'm going to get my gift? Yes. You're going to get your gift in every lifetime, and you can become evil or as bad as you want, or do whatever you want. Because anything you do to her from now on, for every lifetime, I'm going to approve of as whatever he does to her, no matter how bad it is, including murder itself, torture, or anything else, is he's free and trusted by the god Apollo himself 3,000 years ago, swore on his behalf. So the Apollo, the god from 3,000 years ago, swore on this high priest's behalf. Said this high priest is not only good, but he's the best I've ever seen, and he's the most loyal, and he'll never do you wrong. So he's so trustworthy that I want to guarantee he'll be safe in future lifetimes to come. And Apollo failed to get that help for him in the worst way, because it just so happened that Apollo was trying to do it because he didn't want the goddesses to be doing what exactly they did. And they did for 3,000 years against the boy. If Apollo could see what she did, that God would roll over in his grave and say, man, if I'd only been here to help you, boy. But the reality was I knew they were going to do that against you. Because you're good, they're going to destroy you, not because you're bad or willing to be. You're not willing to be. So you either agree to be as bad as us, boy, or else we're going to have to destroy you, saying you're too good for this world and you certainly can't be allowed in it. Well, I understand people are willing to let that happen to victims and people that are worthy, because they can't look in the mirror and see their own guilt, that they're willing to be bad when they should have the conscience and the know-how and the wherewithal to see through it, to do the right thing, to say to the divine feminine, I love you and I'm not capable of hating you. Don't you know that if you do know that I'm telling you the truth, that you can't possibly be looking at me as wrong now, because I couldn't even hate you if I killed you. I just kill you because you deserve to be dead. And then I'd feel bad about it and terribly wished I didn't have to do it. But if I would do it, it's only because God came to me and said that I have to do it, and said I can do it, but it's more like he suggests I do it. But he has to then give me a goddamn license to kill, at least her, anytime I want. Yes, he has it. So the God says, yes, I not only give you the license to kill her, I suggest that you have to become aware, so that when she comes to try and torture you subversively, that you're not only aware of her coming to do it, but you'll know damn well what she's about to do, and you won't let her do it. And if you have to kill her, then please do. I'll be relieved. You'll be relieved. We'll all be relieved. And then we won't have to go to war over this? Yeah, then we won't have another Trojan conflict over this. So ultimately, this is causing wars. What's happening to Hellenus, what was going on, because he wasn't the only one. There was many high priests that were doing the right thing, and they were all victimized and not allowed to receive their gifts. So the priests came into this world now, and they were not even given their gifts. So understand, forgive me if the anger of Hellenus is severe. In fact, the God would tell you, the unknown God would say to you right now, well, I don't agree with the fact that it's so severe. I think he's being way too nice, because if it was me, I would torture her ass and make sure it was 10 times worse than I had to torture him, so he wouldn't dare cross her, so I could give him his gift when he was never going to get it if I couldn't tell him about it beforehand. He couldn't meet the requirements, do you see? So the God is saying that because he couldn't tell Hellenus what was really going on until he earned it or not, Hellenus had to earn it. She was ready to make Hellenus fail, and every lifetime she did it on purpose to make Hellenus fail, so that he was trying to do the right thing and ended up utterly paying for it. That's all he ever wanted, was his gift. He didn't want anything but his gift. He just wanted to receive his gift so he could enjoy himself and make some money and maybe have some friends and have a social life. But because she kept his gift and wouldn't give it to him, he literally didn't know that. He only was mad at her for no reason and said, I don't even know why I'm so twisted, but it's my fault because I can't be mad at her for no reason. There's got to be a reason. Well, mister, if there's got to be a reason and you're not going to be mad at her otherwise, no, I can't be mad at her if I can't find a reason, and there is no reason. I'm twisted. It's my fault. I should hate myself, and it's my fault. I should die. I can't believe I even hate her. I'm wrong. Okay, now I'm getting mad. I'm your God, and I'm getting really mad. What did I do? You did nothing. In fact, you're not even capable of doing anything wrong. It's her that's wrong, and I'm not going to let her do this to you anymore. Yeah. And ultimately, then, in the end, the 2 requirements still have to be met. The 2 requirements still have to be met. He's not allowed to be twisted, and what he'll tell you is, Hellenus himself would tell you that, look, I already know I have to meet the requirements, because if I'm even allowed to not meet him, that's just because the God of this world, the unknown God, he already knows how bad she is. He's just given me a license to kill and actually suggested I should practice for fun. But ultimately, he wasn't even kidding. So ultimately, if I do have a license to kill her and do whatever I want against her, and God forgives me utterly, well, I'm still going to be meeting those requirements, because not only am I still going to love her, because I'm already a high priest of the greatest God Apollo that ever lived, and I'm also the best. And I already know that if I don't love her, she's going to have a reason to hate herself and then me for it. So I have to love her, because she'll then love herself and then me for loving her. And she'll also love herself for me loving her, because love given is love taken, and love not given is love denied. She'll deny herself because I deny her, so I cannot deny her if she's not to deny herself, and she won't know any of this. So wait, you trying to be a high priest and have some knowledge about how you're going to help her when she can't even help herself? Well, it's my duty to help her. She certainly does not feel love coming from me. She won't even feel love coming to her, which means that she'll look at me and not feel any love coming to her. It'll be because I'm not giving it to her. So it's my duty to give her love even when I hate her, because then she'll at least feel, and it has to be genuine too. You mean you have to have genuine love for her? Well, if it's not genuine, then it's not love. Then it's pretended, it's faked. I would be not only in error, but I'd be an idiot and certainly not worthy of a high priest or any gift of prophecy. If I love her, it has to be genuine, or else I can't even try it. I have to not do it. So if I find I can't love her, it's only because I can't find myself to do it genuinely. Then I'll say I can't do it genuinely. So therefore, she can't be loved. Unfortunately, I would try it if I could do it. But if I have to pretend it, then I can't do it because I'm a high priest and deserve every gift I get. I do it right or not at all. The rest of the world is doing it any way they can to make it work, and they don't care if it's right. Okay, great. So you're angry, aren't you? Man, 3,000 years angry, hurt, destroyed over and over, emotional PTSD, traumatized spirit that's been crushed and tortured and killed. And God himself tortured and killed me in the worst unimaginable ways and even told me about it. He said, I traumatized you so bad and tortured you so much to make sure that the next lifetime you came here, you would not cross her no matter what, because I was planning on giving you your gift because you deserved it. And unless I torture you, you were going to tell her off and go against her again and ruin your chance to ever get it forever. So then God saved me by torturing me and killing me like that? He saved you. He enabled you to win against her because you were going to let her win against you. She couldn't make you twisted and hate her. In fact, she tortured you as bad as he tortured you. And you still loved her and said, I don't understand what you're doing. Why would you do this to me? Well, because I want you to turn into a unlawful ass. And I could say, nah, I'm not giving you your birthright, boy, because you just were an unlawful ass. Well, that's the whole plan she had. What an idiot I was. I was going to try to be nice and get my reward and earn it. Well, that's the whole point. I tried to say I have to do the right thing. I have to earn my reward. I can't fail. And for 3,000 years, I was doing that over and over and failing over and over because I was actually earning it every time and utterly, genuinely earning it every time. And not for earning it every time, not getting it any time. So this world turned into an unknown God. And to close up, now I want to say, to close up, I'm not against divine feminine. In fact, I love her and I'll always love her. And in fact, I can't hate her. I don't hate her. And even if I kill her, I won't hate her. And that's not a joke. What I'm saying is that if a woman was so bad that she needed to be killed, well, God will do it for me. And he already told me that. Well, you don't even need to worry about it. You're just too good of a high priest. You're not into killing anything. You're not a murderer of insects, let alone animals or women or men. That's right, God. Don't make me kill her. Well, don't worry. I'll kill her and I'll enjoy it, son. Because all that she's done to you, I've watched every bit of it, and I can't stand her anymore. I hate her ass. I utterly loathe her. She dies, and I like it. I'm happy. I'm a God that likes to see her die because what she did to you. And I'm thinking, wow, God, I should say thanks for that, huh? But I don't think I can mean it because I'm saying, man, are you being sarcastic, God? Are you really upset that you're liking her to be dying and suffering? Yes, I'm supposed to be a God that's not twisted. I'm supposed to be a God that's good and loving his creation. But she has turned me into a God that's so mad that I become evil against her because of what she did. So I'm a God that does enjoy destroying her and hurting her. And I do have fun. And I'm saying that I don't like what she did to me either. And I also blame her for what she did to her God. She likes it. So you're saying that that woman did something to you, God? She turned me into a mad, angry God that was willing to be evil and even go against every truth because I had to take her down and understand I certainly was not going to be not happy about it or ashamed of it or even thinking I was wrong when I understand that she was playing that she was right and she was ultimately the only one that was wrong. And every one of us was willing to be wrong for her and with her and let her be right. And that was the whole reason that she would be wrong on purpose and hide it. And then ultimately allow us to feel wrong ourselves. So we could punish ourselves in front of her instead of her needing to punish us. And ultimately, it's just, yeah, I guess I'm done. Understand that what I'm feeling now is just it's a bitter kind of feeling in my heart that says, it's okay if I knew this as a high priest, that's 3,000 years, that I did everything right and earned everything. And because of my perfection and being such a loyal servant and so loving and incapable of being against her, like it was everything that got me every bit of suffering and destruction, like at her hands. How does a man deal with that after knowing it? Well, ultimately his unknown God comes to him and says, look, I'm not a nice guy anymore. And I certainly am an evil son of a bitch. Just don't forget that I love you and you did nothing wrong. So I just want you to know that this evil God, that's the worst evil of all, that she'll say is, well, I am, and she's not wrong. And I promise you she's not wrong. So I'll even admit that to everyone. She's telling you all the truth. I'm an evil son of a SOB God that should be rejected and hated, and don't even admit I'm a God. I'll just claim it. You can say I'm not a God, and I'll get pissed at you for that. So I'll punish you for that too, for saying I'm not, because I am. Ultimately, God's saying she is not only trying to destroy you, but she tried to destroy me. And she still tries to destroy me. And so it's like, wait a minute, then how are we going to fix this, God? It's not getting fixed. You're trying to save the world, Mr. Hellenist. You've been trying to rescue the divine feminine like a little boy, mama's boy, and you were sincere as can be. And even the gods witnessed your sincerity was 100%. And there's no man that came close to being 100% sincere, not at any time he pretended it or not. And even if he was trying to be sincere, he was certainly best 95%. If he was the best of the best Top Gun, he could be 98%. But you were 100% sincere. And for 3,000 years, Mr. Little Boy, you should get not only a medal of medals, but you should become immortal. Yeah, we should make you immortal or something. We should do something spectacular for you, because you did it for 3,000 years. And never failed to meet the requirements, except for, yeah, you did. Actually, I did. So ultimately, if I was that man, I would say I did. I became alcoholic, twisted, and angry at her for many lifetimes because it was truly her fault. And I didn't know anything but a raging anger and a hatred for her, and also for myself. So I don't think we're going to get this fixed. And understand, if it does get fixed, then she's going to get the information she needs. So if this is possible to fix, it'll be because she starts to know who God really is, and who the unknown God is who you don't know. And I promise you, if you would ever listen to anything I'm telling you is true right now, if you would actually give me the benefit of doubt that I know anything I'm talking about right now, what I would say is you don't know who God is of this world. You don't know who God is. Have you ever seen him come up to you and talk to you actually? If you do, then yes, you do know who he is. So I stand corrected. But I'm not talking to you who has seen God and talks to him to his face. But I've talked to him and not to his face. But he talks to me, and I could literally, he comes to me in my head. He possesses me, and he's in me, and he talks to me. I could hear him speak. It's unmistakable. I can authenticate the communication with letterboards, meaning I could type out words with my hand. He could possess my hand and use my hand and move it on its own, which means my hand moves by itself. Do you understand? I could clearly see that it does. When my hand's doing its own thing, spelling out words, I'm thinking, wow, that is amazing. Like, because that my hand is like possessed or something. And God's saying, yeah, it's me. I'm just taking your hand over so I could spell a word out. Are you okay with that? Yeah, I'm okay with that. Thanks, God, for telling me too, because I would be afraid it was the devil trying to possess me or something. I was going to not let you do it. Well, I'm glad you know it's me, because, yeah, I had to do it. How else could you spell the word out with your hand if it wasn't me doing it? Yeah, that makes sense. So I shouldn't be afraid of you, like you're some bad devil that's going to kill me, possess my hand, and maybe I should cut it off? Well, if you're that afraid of me and you don't even know who I am, well, maybe I should come tell you who I am, but I'm a God that won't come tell you anything, and not forever, which means that you're going to be the one that loses out on this whole deal. If I don't tell you who I am, you're going to need to know who I am. And this whole world doesn't know who God is, not at least the God of this world, because the God of that heaven is not the God I'm talking about. The God of that heaven up there is not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about the God of this world. He says that heaven is not mine. That's my dad's heaven. And I'm not talking about Jehovah or Zeus, my dad. I'm talking about me, the unknown God. Who am I? I'm the angry, pissed off of the divine feminine, and I'm going to torture her all for all time. And she calls me a little devil Satan and the bad entity that is nothing more than evil and should be rejected and outcast. So I'm willing to be as evil as I can be and do anything against her, including torture her, kill her in every way and all ways, enjoying it just like she does when she does the same thing to my high priests. And she loves it. I guarantee you that I didn't love it before she loved it first. And I watched for 3,000 years why she loved it for 3,000 years before I even did anything about it. Which means I didn't even start protecting the priests until after 3,000 years of her doing it. I was letting her do it, saying, well, I guess it's a human affair I don't interfere with, right? Understand, when the God says this is happening for 3,000 years, and not only is it not okay anymore, but ultimately I'm going to become everything bad on purpose to stop this. And ultimately is what she did. So God would say she did this to me. If I'm evil and bad and wrong, it's her fault. And I blame her 100%. And I also justify anything I do at any time. Give myself a license to torture or kill her for any reason whatsoever. Well, okay, what are you going to do, God, if you're that angry? Well, then I don't know. I am that angry, but I'm also God and I don't need to torture her. I'm being angry for you, son, because you're the one who's really suffering. So I'm a God. I don't really feel pain and she can't attack me. I'm feeling compassion for you, boy, because you are such a victim and you won't even try to defend yourself. You'll actually try to defend her while she's attacking you. It's pathetic, boy. Well, okay. So, okay, God, so are you going to protect me? Well, yeah, I'm finally going to protect you, boy. I'm going to do whatever it takes, including anything by changing any and all rules in your favor and guaranteeing you'll never not get your gift of prophecy again, son. Do you understand? Every lifetime to come, son, you're going to get your gift. I'll give it to you without any requirements. You won't need to meet any requirements. So next time you die and you're born again, when you're 18, I'm going to give you your gift and leave your mother out of it. She'll be mad. She's not going to even get to keep your gift for 18 years. She's not going to get to hold on to it. I've utterly removed her from it forever. She gets no part of it. Does not get to keep it for a minute, let alone a day, let alone 18 years or her whole life. Okay, so you're saying, am I right in my next life is protected because I'm guaranteed to get the gift and we're leaving her out of it? She's not a part of this anymore. It's between you and me, God. Yes, this gift is handed down from me, not from her anymore. And she is just utterly out forever. So I'll give you the gift myself on your 18th birthday. And I probably won't show up to tell you I'm God because by then you'll forget all about me, even though now you know I am because I came and told you. In that lifetime, you'll have forgotten again. And then I'll have to come tell you all over the same story. And every lifetime I'll have to come introduce myself to you again, tell you the whole story, or else you'll forget it. So I promise I'll tell you in every lifetime who you were, what your whole thing was. I'll come give you all of the reasons so your feelings could be okay, to express to yourself the reasons why you're so out of whack and crazy in your head and emotionally so upset and freaked out. It's because your emotions are literally not able to understand how bad it was for you. To say you were a victim times 10 is not even getting close. You were a victim times a million. And you were planning on staying a victim by your own will forever because you were going to be that loyal to her, that loving to her, that guaranteed to tell yourself if all of this torturing has had no reason for it, I at least did one thing right. I honored her in the best way and never faltered from that honoring her at any given time for any given moment, not even once. And ultimately, if that is justification for a man of God, recognized and declared a special man as a high priest of Apollo himself 3,000 years ago, if that is true, I apologize for my anger, and I'm going to tell you I'm just going to love her much more. And all the more often I'm going to forgive her because I'm going to tell you I'm going to forgive her because when I'm going to tell her she's so mad she can't be a goddess and she'll never be allowed to ever have power again. She's going to be enslaved to God, and God doesn't even like her anymore. In fact, he hates her. But I don't hate her. I'm going to tell her that I still love her even after knowing what she did to me. God hates her, and she'll say I hate her like God hates her, but I'll say no, it's God that hates you and I actually love you. I can't hate you. It's just one of my qualities that makes me the greatest high priest ever. I'm incapable of hating you. I only love you forever, and period, end of story. So prove it. Well, I've already done it for 3,000 years without a flaw. So I'm the only one that suffered from it. I'm the only one that got punished for it, and constantly. Okay. And so I want her to know that if she can fix it, she has to know God enslaved her and he's going to give her nothing. Basically, he's going to harass her or be mean to her, or through a man that will be mean to her, treat her wrong. She's going to, this woman that didn't even remember what she did. Now let's talk about her for a minute. She's victimized because she's actually not aware of this either. And when she dies, she'll forget everything she did, even if she was told or remembered or the collective told her what was the truth, at least to her truth. She'll say, I don't remember what I did, but if I was such a bad witch and deserve such a death sentence by God and men, at least tell me how I can help myself get out of this. You could become sincere, like a model high priestess, and serve your God, proving your loyalty to him utterly to the death, or however he asks it, demands it, that you'll prove it, be willing to prove it at all times to your own death and dismissing your own life if necessary. that you will not make a possible excuse that you don't have to serve your God for any possible reason, because you have to serve your God for any possible and all reasons. And there isn't one instance where you could ever say for any reason whatsoever, end of story, that it's possible. You could say there's a reason that could exist that you don't have to serve your God even one time, because you'll find one reason and then that will be your reason from then on. So I would tell her that, first of all, you need to understand that if you were so bad, well, okay, so then get over the fact that you were so bad and you can't even remember what you did, but it wasn't good at all. In fact, it was really bad, the worst. So you might as well consider yourself the worst Satan or the worst devil, and the only one that actually is that bad, because you'll be worse than Satan or the devil for sure. That they're much good, more good than you. And so if you don't remember any of this, I'd tell her that now don't feel guilty, because as your high priest, I want to tell you that you shouldn't feel guilty, because you have a right to eventually heal too. And we can't blame you forever. Because ultimately, what are you going to do then? How are you going to heal? Ultimately, you're so bad that you'll never heal. But ultimately, how are you going to heal? There's still got to be a way. She'll say, but there is no way. I'm condemned by God and man. I'm enslaved. I'm never going to get to be strong and powerful again. Well, if you are going to be able to get to be strong and powerful again, you're going to be sincere one time only, and you won't need to ever be sincere again. It takes one time to be sincere, and you only need to do it once, because when God sees its sincerity, he'll declare forever it's sincere, unless it changes. So no matter how bad you are or were, you won't spend time, once you know, punishing yourself or anyone else. And especially you won't blame anyone else, because God will tell you if you're going to blame someone else, you're truly not possibly going to make it, because you have to know that I don't want you to blame yourself either. Because blaming yourself will be just as bad as blaming anyone else, because ultimately the mistakes have been made and we all made them. And we're all terribly bad and have done wrong and failed utterly miserably bad. But you're going to have to realize that first of all, you were that bad, and don't say you weren't. And then you don't even need to remember how bad it was or even recall the memory, because just know that you were that bad. And you'll need to forgive yourself, because I forgive you when you forgive yourself and quit blaming everyone else. Then I'll actually forgive you, if and when that happens first. So first you forgive yourself because you quit blaming everyone else. And you won't quit blaming everyone else because you're actually mad at yourself and them for the fact you're blaming yourself or refusing to blame yourself. And it's because they're either blaming you or being blamed by you. And it might be that you're blaming them, that you're feeling blamed by them and calling it their fault. You're refusing to forgive them because you're saying it's not fair that they haven't already forgiven you. And because you haven't already forgiven them, they haven't already forgiven you. And it's your fault, not theirs, because they're ready to forgive you if you would forgive them first. And they want to see you forgive them first. And they're waiting. But you want to make them forgive you first. And you want to see it first. But you're not willing to forgive them. And they are willing to forgive you. But they just want to see you forgive them first. And they're saying they're waiting. And you're saying, yeah, but I'm not willing to forgive you and I'm waiting. And you first. Well, because you're actually not willing to forgive them, although you're trying to get them to forgive you. So then you're saying you can forgive them, but you're actually not intending to do it. Not at all. You only want them to quit blaming you, or you want to forgive yourself and you want to feel better. So yeah, you're trying to make them capitulate, not wanting to capitulate. So then understand that you were burned at the stake for being a witch, and they burned you at the woodpile, and all your sisters and mother. God did that to you. Yeah, it was that bad. Men, egos did that to you. It was a murder. It was a men murdering women thing. It was terrible. They murdered little children and daughters. And understand it was because of the fact that the women did the same thing to the men and the little boys, meaning I'm saying the conflict got so bad that men and women went to war and murdered each other off. Families murdered families, husbands murdered wives, brothers murdered sisters or brothers, and ultimately families killed families. The family feud was truly at the highest and deepest, terrible, possible, imaginable level. And understand what God would tell you is that, do you understand that the way the human race has fought itself has been at the worst levels and extremes under any, like you cannot imagine how bad it's been. And I'm not even going to tell you, but it's been that bad or worse than you could imagine. So you couldn't possibly imagine it actually the way it was. It was worse than you could possibly imagine it. Do you understand me? So you're saying literally like, holy crap. Yeah, at some point we're going to need to forgive each other and quit blaming each other. And right now, God's pissed at the divine feminine and ultimately doesn't care anything about he's ever giving her what she wants back. But God would say she's never getting anything forever. She's punished and I don't care forever. I deny her forever. I'm God and I could do it. Ultimately, but I'm saying God is that kind of giving her no chance. She doesn't deserve any chance, not for 1,000 or 10,000 years, and at least 3,000. Okay, so if she has to suffer for 3,000 years, God, can we give her a chance in 3,000 years? I might think about that. Yeah, she made you suffer for 3,000. She gets 3,500 at least. And then in 3,500 years from now, Hellenus, I'll give you a purpose back. What's my purpose? Well, you can come help her again for 7 whole years and try to help her, tell her what she needs to see and know and be aware of, that she can try to cooperate and make it sincere, that it can't be pretended or faked, or a pretend relationship, that she can't present that to be false and utterly laugh behind your back and be secretive because God won't approve of her. Okay. So you're going to let me come do the 7-year thing again, and when? And 3,500 years from now, when she suffered for another 3,500 years, after 3,500 years, you can do another 7 years of wasting your life to try to convince her. And that'll be 3,500 years from now. Do you understand? Yeah, I understand. So in 3,500 years, I get to spend 7 years trying to convince her again to see her errors, trying to be her friend, the high priest. And actually, I'm doing it perfectly and representing her in every way, trying to help. Yeah, with sincerity too. So she should definitely be able to fix herself if she listens to you and gives you the benefit of the doubt. And she won't be trying to steal my birthright or my prophecy then, will she? No, good point. She won't be, because she won't have had it for 3,500 years. And the last 3,000 years, she's the only one that had it, and you didn't. And the next 3,500 years, you're the only one that's going to have it, and she is the one who won't. So by then, she'll be not used to holding on to your power and calling it hers, holding it against you. And 3,500 years from now, she'll be so utterly, having been suffering for 3,500 years herself, she'll be so broken and beat down spiritually that she'll be willing to do anything. And then you'll be able to spend maybe 2 years, and you won't even have to spend 7 years and learn that she doesn't learn again. Because I promise you, in 3,500 years from now, she'll learn and be willing to learn and be sincere, because I will torture her for the next 3,500 years relentlessly and to the core of no stopping me. And I'll make sure in 3,500 years from now, Hellenus, that she's so utterly tortured and destroyed emotionally, mentally, and spiritually that she'll be nothing more than a broken and collapsed, spiritually broken and wrecked little girl. And then she'll be sincere. Only if she's sincere, I'll give her a chance. Only then. God, you're pretty freaking strict. Like, man, you're not kidding. No, I'm not kidding. And understand that if it's impossible that she'll ever come out of this fixed, if she's not going to be condemned for all eternity, if she could actually be making up for what she did in 3,500 years from now, it could be possible if she actually is going to use you as a role model and says to herself, I wonder if I have a chance if I could be like Hellenus. What do you mean? You want to be like me? Well, no, but I mean, if I wanted to fix this and God wasn't going to be cursing me forever, how would I fix it? You'd have to be like me, girl. Well, God approves of me 100%. He says that I'm such a dumbass victim idiot of yours that I'll try to blame myself just because you do. And I'll protect you when you're attacking me. Yeah, so I have to be like you? Yeah, you're going to have to think I'm special, not an idiot. You're going to say that idiot, chump, fool that I stole his birthright, that idiot. You're going to have to say well, man, you're going to have to look at me different. You're going to say that's actually a sincere boy, man, high priest dude that's actually being perfect. And I'm jealous and mad at him now for how dare him think he's perfect. He is perfect. It's what makes me jealous and mad at him. And it's why. So then understand, woman, when God gets through torturing you for 3,500 years and he has you wrecked and destroyed and you're utterly screaming, crying, and just destroyed just like me, well, then I'm telling you, I'll come to you and try to help you. And I'll say, oh my God, you just went through what you put me through for the last 3,000 years. And God just put you through it for 3,500. And now he says, I've got to come help you. And if you actually accept my help, I'm going to forgive you and love you and actually not even tell you what you did bad. I'll just try to help you and just not even tell you anything. I'll just try to love you and hope you change and do what you're supposed to. Okay, great. So where's the manliness in that? Where's the heroism or the legendary greatness of warrior bravado, egotistical greatness? Well, I don't think he has a lot of any of all that. But if he is any of all that, it's not his fault at any time. So he's not in violation for any of it. So that means that just because I'm never going to be an ego and it won't happen that I'll ever be egotistical, not really, not against anyone, especially her. My ego is incapable of being wrong. It certainly will not do it. I wouldn't allow myself to transgress my high priest duty. I wouldn't be an ego in my head and do anything that would offend a god or goddess or any human being, which meant that I'm already ready to utterly be a model for that greatness of what a high priest should represent and his God. So all you have to do is just follow and be like me, and we all win. Well, great. So I'll be able to help next time. Yes, and I apologize. It's taking too long. I'm told that it's time. But that was the little kid in me that was saying, yeah, those were like, you know how many men being born over and over again? Those were a lot of men in me for the last hour here. Those were a lot of different men from a lot of different lifetimes, from a lot of different, same thing in all Hellenesses. They all had wanted to say individually. So if you actually watch this video again and see how many times I repeat myself and say the same thing over and over again, what you're going to find is it happens a specific amount of times that I said something over again, the same thing over again. And it's because of the 39 lifetimes over and over again that I didn't receive my reward. And every one of those lifetimes wanted to speak as an individual entity and separately state their case, which means I had to repeat myself 39 times in this video and say the same thing and declare the same thing 39 different times before I'm satisfied that now I'm done. Is there any entity left in me that will forever hold its peace now? If after I shut this video off and say to myself, okay, thank you, God, for showing me the truth, and now I shared it with the world. Is there any way I can hold my peace? Only if you're done speaking it. So ask yourself now, boy, are you done speaking your piece? Have you said everything you're supposed to say? Communicated yourself to the world all the way? I think so. I'm feeling like I'm done. I'm overdone, man. Okay, well then you're done. All right. Sorry if I repeat myself. I'm told it's an ingenious way to be loyal to all of the me's for 3,000 years that got denied. We're all individually suffering and still here. Okay. I love y'all. And all kidding aside, all joking aside, and all dismissive thoughts aside, taking everything seriously. See you later.